I am a former Pokemon World Champion who just can't seem to perform at the World Championships anymore. I am the most decorated player in the history of the game, the only player to have won every single level of competitive Pokemon tournament, and I'm still winning tournaments almost every year, tournaments that aren't the World Championships. Despite my long list of accolades, in recent years, I've been struggling with the most important event of the entire circuit. The Pokemon World Championships are the pinnacle of the game. I spent years trying to win after I fell just short in my second year of competing, and then realized my dream when I finally won the whole thing back in 2016 with the help of my friends. But since then, there's only been one single year where I even had a chance to win the whole thing again. And it's not like I won and then I became washed. I've had many incredible seasons since 2016, but when it comes to Worlds, it doesn't seem to matter how good my regular season was. Year after year, I qualify, and year after year, I stumble. Not this year. I am tired of stumbling. In some ways, having won before makes falling at the last hurdle feel so much worse. See, even before I became the world champion, I always did pretty well at Worlds. I finished 6th in my first year competing, and then 2nd the year after. I've got more Worlds top cuts than any other player, and that's not even counting the 2 that I barely missed out on because of a bad tiebreaker. I don't say any of this to brag, but more to help you understand how jarring it feels to go from this.
Nothing else. He went for the swords dance. WolfeyVGC is your 2016 Pokemon video game world champion in the Masters Division.
To this.
Unfortunately for WolfeyVGC, he is eliminated.
But it's not like all these losses have been for nothing. Every single time that I lose, I learn from it. This year, I know that something has to change with how I've been approaching this tournament. I know that I've got the potential to win Worlds again and prove that I'm the greatest player to ever play Pokemon. Not to anyone else, but to myself. This year, I'm betting everything on me, which might sound a little silly. I mean, don't I always bet everything on me? No. When I won Worlds, I bet everything on the Pokemon that I brought. My friends and I brought Pokemon that nobody else thought could win, but it was one of the best teams that I've ever used. And it was these overlooked Pokemon that gave us a major advantage into the most popular team in the tournament. Ever since then, I've been trying to build another team just as game-breaking, where battles are won before they even begin. But turns out, that's really hard. And in trying to recapture the magic, it's felt like I've been showing up to Worlds with nothing up my sleeve and a team of dead doves in my hat. So for this season, I set a rule for myself, or maybe it's more of a restriction. I'm done trying to crack this game open with tools from the back of the shelf. I'm only going to use the strongest Pokemon this year, because I am tired of getting outgunned. Which is how I ended up with the team that I brought to the North American International Championships, the final tournament before Worlds. It's June 10th, the day after NAIC. This is the second biggest event of the season, and I practiced pretty intensely to try and bring home a win. I started strong, winning my first 8 games in a row, after which things got a bit tougher and I wasn't able to keep up the streak. In the end, I placed 22nd, which is totally respectable. But here's the thing. Before the tournament, I got a message from one of my best friends in the entire world, Marcus. He thought that this team was so incredibly overpowered, so game-breakingly busted, that I shouldn't bring it to NAIC, but instead save it for Worlds. And Marcus has never told me to save a team before. Marcus's opinion holds a lot of weight for me, but after giving it a lot of thought, I made the call to bring the team anyway. While I agreed that the team was good enough to win Worlds, I wasn't convinced that the team was as refined as it needed to be. And what better opportunity to take it for a test ride than the last big event before Worlds. And good thing I tried it out, because rather than winning the tournament like I had hoped, I instead had my worst finish of the season. Though that's less because I performed poorly and more because this has been one of my best years of competitive Pokemon ever. I placed first, and second at the only 3 regional championships I attended, and finished 13th at the European International Championships. But even though technically NAIC was my worst finish of the season, I still really believe in this team, which is relevant because although NAIC was the last tournament before Worlds, it was my first tournament playing the brand new format, Regulation G, that we'll be using for the World Championships. Every other tournament I played in this year used a completely different rule set. Regulation G allows every trainer to use just one restricted Pokemon, massively powerful Pokemon that warp the entire game around themselves. And at first, it looked like there was one restricted Pokemon that would put the rest out of a job. Calyrex Shadow Rider. It is the fastest restricted Pokemon, it's got a broken signature move, and it's one of the only Pokemon to have two abilities, one of which powers it up every single time it gets a KO, turning a Shadow Ball into a Shadow Lance. But then something happened that nobody was ready for. Calyrex Shadow Rider was bad. So bad that players started calling it Calyrex Fraud Rider. At the first tournament of the new format, not a single Calyrex Shadow made it to the final bracket. And NAIC only went slightly better, with just one making it to the final 8 players. The horse had just gone ghost. But despite the mediocre results, I'm convinced that Calyrex Shadow Rider is the single strongest restricted Pokemon. And I want to use it because I'm in my strong Pokemon era. But if it's the strongest Pokemon, why is it not getting any results? Well, I think that everybody else is using Calyrex Shadow wrong. To understand why, we need to talk about how Regulation G works. Technically, there are 25 different restricted Pokemon to choose from, but I think that only 7 of them are actually good enough to win the World Championships. Each of these Pokemon have known strengths and weaknesses. Miraidon hits ridiculously hard, but it's reliant on the electric terrain, and one of the best Pokemon in the format is Rillaboom, who turns off electric terrain every single time that it switches in. Koraidon uses the sun to power up its fire-type moves, but it needs to terastallize in order to really put up big numbers. And sun is easier to neutralize than electric terrain because rain is a lot easier to fit onto a team. Zamazenta uses its defense stat offensively, and it can protect your team from spread moves, which nearly every other restricted Pokemon uses, but it doesn't like to switch out and it has trouble hitting ghost types. Kyogre is great at hitting both your opponent's Pokemon for huge damage, but it's slower than many other restricted Pokemon, it's reliant on its weather, and it's really only reliable when it's at full HP. Terapagos is incredibly tanky and has a ridiculous signature move that cannot be resisted, but it needs a damage boost before it gets pretty scary. It almost always needs to terastallize, and it can't change its typing defensively. Calyrex Ice is unbelievably hard to get rid of, has a broken signature move, and powers itself up every single time it takes a KO, but it's got an awkward speed stat and it really needs Trick Room to be up in order to be at maximum threat level. And then there's Calyrex Shadow. You already understand its strengths, but it does have an Achilles hoof. It's typing. Ghost and Psychic have terrible synergy together. They overlap on not one, but 2 weaknesses, resulting in double weaknesses to both Ghost and Dark. And offensively, neither type can hit Dark type Pokemon. Players right now are really only finding success with Calyrex one way, as a setup sweeper using terastallization to get around Calyrex's Dark and Ghost type weaknesses. And they're turning Calyrex into a Fairy type. Fairy makes some sense intuitively. It resists Dark and allows you to use the Fairy type move Draining Kiss, which heals the user for a huge amount of the damage that it deals, turning Calyrex into an unkillable super tank. These teams are entirely built around Calyrex Shadow, often dedicating at least half the party to just supporting it, and aim to set Calyrex up and then completely ride away with the game. But this approach doesn't sit well with me, and I'll tell you why. First, being entirely reliant on any one Pokemon is inherently really risky, because if anything happens to your race car driver, you can sure bet that the pit crew isn't going to be able to win the game on their own. In a game like Pokemon with critical hits, damage rolls, and a whole lot of other variants, putting all your eggs in the Calyrex basket rider is a gamble, and it's one that I'm not willing to take. Also, Draining Kiss is a really weak move. Even after multiple boosts and terastallization, it just cannot put up strongest restricted Pokemon numbers. Turns out when a move starts out at 50 base power, it just takes too much for it to really get its act together. And another thing, I don't really like Terra Fairy. While it does give you a dark resist, it doesn't help with any of the other restricted Pokemon. Yeah, it does help with the assorted dark types of the format, but is resisting Incineroar really more important than resisting Kyogre or Calyrex Ice? Which is how I got to the starting point for my NAIC team. Terra Water, Calyrex Shadow. This allows it to resist the main attacking moves of Calyrex Ice and Kyogre. It also lets me use Terra Blast as a water type move, hitting popular Pokemon that resist Astro Barrage for super effective damage, and more importantly, having another move on my restricted Pokemon that doesn't require 6 boosts in order to do damage. Calyrex really wants to use the move Nasty Plot to set up, allowing it to double its special attack stat. So I had some support Pokemon to help buy it time to use the scary move. I'm going to use Incineroar and Rillaboom, two very reliable Pokemon that can slow down my opponent's teams with fake out pressure, as well as provide useful abilities that help keep my team alive. And that is it for support Pokemon. Because remember, my other problem with Calyrex-centric teams is that they rely too heavily on only Calyrex to do all the damage. I won't even have Draining Kiss to help keep it alive, so I really can't afford to go all in on the house horse. Urshifu is one of the best Pokemon in the game and gives me a way to hit Terapagos, who's got one of the best matchups out of any of the other restricted Pokemon against Calyrex Shadow. Now I'm weak to Koraidon, so I add Pelipper to give me a range setter to shut down Koraidon Sun while powering up both Terra Blast and Surging Strikes. Lastly, I add one of my favorite Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet, Offensive Farigiraf. It's not a popular set by any means, but I think it's really powerful. And I even won a tournament with it earlier this year. Now, you already know that this team was not able to win NAIC, but I don't think that's because the core idea was bad. If anything, the team definitely proved that it worked. It just wasn't as refined as it needed to be. Having effectively 3 water type Pokemon probably isn't optimal now that I say it out loud. Also, I lost multiple matches because I didn't figure out what the best speed stats were for my Pokemon before I entered the tournament. It might not seem like a tiny choice like this would have that big of an impact, but in this format, the Pokemon are just so powerful that it's these tiny choices that often determine who wins. So even though I didn't win, I'm still going to use this team as my starting point for the World Championships. And I'm taking preparation as seriously as I ever have before. My friends Aaron Zhang and Aaron Trailer both finished up grad school this spring, and they've got time off before starting their jobs in the fall. So the 3 of us decided to do something that we've never done before, and meet up in Finland to hold our own 2-week personal boot camp to prepare for the World Championships. By the time I get to Finland, I want to have a team that's 95%-ish done so that we can all refine it and take it to the top. But first, it's time to hit the road, baby! I'm heading out on a road trip with aforementioned dear friend and genius player, the effervescent Dr. Aaron Trailer. We're driving across California to make it to Aaron Zhang's graduation from business school. Just 2 cowpokes hitting the open road, nothing but the wind at our backs to guide us. And this cool car that we rented. Terrible visibility, by the way. Could not see anything. If you saw me on the roads, I'm sorry. Also, the car was only cool once we figured out how to put the top down. I'm not going to tell you how long that one took. For the next 5 days, we're going to eat good food, see cool places, eat a lot of ice cream, and of course, talk about Pokemon. By the time we're done, I know we'll be one step closer to winning the Pokemon World Championships. I did something I've never done before for this video. I hired a composer. The musical piece you'll hear every time a new day starts was composed specifically for this video. There's also some other incredible pieces you'll hear later on. Also, all the illustrations you're seeing are custom made by our talented illustrator, but you might not realize the level of detail put into them. In this illustration, there's several sponsors that are actually the different in-game companies that sponsor the gyms in Sword and Shield. I'm telling you this because I want you, the viewer, to know how much care and attention to detail we put into this. The Worlds video is the one that I care about the most, and each year, my team puts an unholy amount of work into making it the best it can be. As part of making this video the best it can be, I chose to not take a sponsor, as I didn't want to be beholden to anyone's vision other than my own. If videos like this one matter to you, there's a couple ways you can support us. If you want to see a more behind-the-scenes look into my brain as a competitive player, I have a Patreon where I post 3 additional videos a month. If that's not for you right now, that's okay. Subscribing is a free way to support the channel and all of us who work on it. You'll also get videos like this one in your feed. And let's just say, I don't think you're going to want to miss the next tournament video that's coming out later this year. 64 days. In just 64 days, I'll be competing for a chance at the title. 64 days might sound like a long time, but in order to take on a task as gargantuan as becoming the Pokemon World Champion, I need to make every minute count. It's already been a couple days since NAIC finished, and I'm not much further along. But today, I made the hardest decision of my entire season. One of the hardest decisions I've had to make in my 13 years competing. My friends and I need to go separate directions. My friends are incredibly important to me. I love them dearly and I really want them to succeed. Their wins feel like my wins in part too. And that's exactly why we can't work together. At least not in the same way that we have in the past. Last year, my friends and I worked tirelessly on one team that we all brought to Worlds, but the team didn't work. It wasn't the right team for any of us. Not a single one of us that used the team, myself included, made it out of the first day of the tournament. As a group, it was our worst performance ever. We didn't have a fallback option because every single one of us put our eggs in the same basket. A basket that, as it turned out, had a surprisingly flimsy bottom. If I can be honest, I feel a little bit guilty about how Worlds went last year. I was the primary team builder, and the team didn't work because I didn't build it right. And I know that none of my friends feel this way or blame me for what happened, but I still feel bad about it. Like I said, their wins feel like my wins, but that also means that their losses feel like my losses. Obviously, I still want to work together with everyone, but rather than all working together on one team, I think it makes more sense to divide and conquer. There's a few advantages to this. By splitting up, we'll be able to cover more ground and learn more about the strengths and weaknesses of the different restricted Pokemon. That way, as Worlds gets closer, if any of us realize that our concept isn't working, we can use the learnings of everybody else to course correct and change directions much faster. And there's one more advantage too. Having the right team is a huge part of winning Worlds, but the right team for me might be different than the right team for Aaron or Marcus or Yuki. I really want my friends to succeed. But this year, I'm not trying to build a team that breaks the game or even gives me especially good matchups. I just want to use strong Pokemon that let me play the game in the way that feels best to me. Building a team that everyone can use isn't the same as building a team that I can master. And I think this style of team building is definitely the right approach for where I'm at, but I'm not convinced that it's what's best for everyone else. Of course, it is possible that someone will strike gold with their team building and we'll all end up coming together to reap the riches. But for now, we've got to search for our own treasures. In the meantime, Aaron and I are on the last part of our road trip, which means it's time for Ostrichland, USA, baby! A few days ago, I realized what we as a group would need to do in order for one of us to become the Pokemon World Champion. But with all of the ostriches and the ice cream, I didn't really have a chance to talk to everybody else about it until today. Luckily, I have world-class friends. And funnily enough, we're all on the same page about trying a different approach this year. Brendan pointed out that recently, we've all performed best by following our own individual Pokemon instincts. I think subconsciously, this is a step that a lot of us realized we were going to have to take, even though we hadn't all talked about it together. Speaking of my friends, it's time to take a harder look at the friends who came with me to NAIC. I need to reevaluate my team with fresh eyes and see who isn't pulling their weight on this journey to becoming the world champion. Right now, I am drowning in water types and I need to find a way to get back to dry land. Now, one of the Pokemon I'm talking about isn't technically a water type. Calyrex Shadow Rider. I nicknamed mine Haunts, an homage to this image because my NAIC Calyrex was so tanky. If I want less water, I can obviously just change Calyrex's Terra type to Fairy or to something else, but Terra Water Calyrex is the horse I've got my money on in this race and I'm not ready to change my bet just yet. Now, I don't want to give you the idea that nothing has to change and everything's, just fine and dandy as is. I am making a very important shift in Hans's training regimen. It's taking off the weights and going to run at max speed. At NAIC, I focused heavily on surviving multiple powerful attacks at the cost of only being faster than Miraidon. But getting outrun by opposing Calyrex Shadow made the mirror match an uphill battle, and my lethargic pony was the reason that I lost a set. I am now willing to sacrifice some bulk in order to be the fastest horse this side of the Mississippi. After all, I don't need to worry about surviving attacks if I just knock out my opponent's Pokemon before they can move. But if Calyrex isn't going to change, then that means that I'm still waterlogged. There's two candidates for the bench: Eye Drop Food, the Pelipper, and Slippery Dog, the Urshifu. Pelipper might seem like a weird choice for a team that doesn't really have a way to take advantage of the rain, but Eye Drop Food is vital for me if I don't want this stupid sandwich slurping cycle to slaughter all of my summons. So if Pelipper has to stick around, then I guess the only option I have left for a candidate to drop is Urshifu? One of the most broken Pokemon in the game of all time? That does not feel very good. I mean, what Pokemon could even fill these giant shoes? On the one hand, I want to remove a water type. On the other hand, I need to make sure I have a fighting type on this team in order to make sure that I don't just auto lose to Terapagos, which is one of Calyrex's worst matchups. Wait a second. I know a Pokemon that has two really big hands. Iron Hands is not a cut and dry upgrade over Urshifu. It is much slower, and it can't, nearly break the entire game by just straight up ignoring Protect. But there are things that this big hunk of metal can do better than Urshifu too. It has considerably more bulk than the bipedal bear, allowing me to move the Focus Sash that Urshifu was hogging over to Pelipper. But this is kind of one step forward, one step back when it comes to the items. See, Iron Hands' best item is the Assault Vest, since it not only has lower special bulk, but it also has tons of good attacking moves that it wants to use. And right now, it is my Rillaboom, Fern the Stern, wearing the ever so in-demand vest. If I take away Rillaboom's statement piece, my Miraidon matchup becomes much more naked. But with Iron Hands on the team, do I actually need Rillaboom? Iron Hands resists electric moves and turns Miraidon's electric terrain against it. What if I replace Rillaboom with an entirely different Pokemon? One that doesn't have nearly as discerning an eye for fashion, but is still an icon in its own right. Maybe even a Pokemon that can support Calyrex with, I don't know, some cheeky redirection. It's time to bring back the Pokemon that won me Orlando Regionals earlier this year. The top of the table toadstool, Amoonguss, aka Glue Trap. Amoonguss and Iron Hands together give me a great deterrent to opposing Trick Room strategies, and they both work better inside my own Trick Room than the Pokemon that they're replacing. More importantly, Amoonguss is great at slowing down opposing Terapagos, which is really important now that Urshifu is off the team. Even when I had Urshifu, the only restricted Pokemon that I lost to twice at NAIC was the stupid broken turtle. Everything should work in theory, but I've learned the hard way that theory and practice, they're not always best buddies. I hop online and I play a few practice games and whoa, this feels good. This feels really good. With Iron Hands on my side, my matchup versus the sun-setting restricted Pokemon feels way stronger, and Amoonguss feels so much better against Terapagos. The clearest winner by far, though, is my new and improved Calyrex with the Zoomies. I've got the fastest stallion in the stable now, and it makes those annoying mirror matchups so much easier. My practice today went super well, and the team feels good, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. There is still a lot of time until Worlds. And I've learned the hard way that the line between we are so back and it is so over is roughly 3 bad practice sets. Today, I made the first major set of changes to my team, but there are certainly many more ahead. But this year, I'm trying something new. Every time I make a change on the team, I'm taking detailed notes as to why. This way, when muck inevitably hits the fan, I'll be able to go back, retrace my steps, and see where I went wrong. There is so much in Pokemon that I cannot control, but the one thing that I can control is, well, me. I'm going to count on Wolf to keep Wolf accountable. I might feel different every day, but these notes are crystallizations of each of my past selves. It gives me a kind of council of wolves, each offering their insight the day that I need them. Tomorrow is a new day and a new wolf. I'm excited to hear what wisdom he has to offer. Oh, I hate Smeargle, stupid little rat with a hat. The problem is that my team is so slow now that I dropped Urshifu that I just can't get rid of it fast enough. I keep drafting different Pokemon that like might be able to beat it, but they're all just sketches and ugh. Maybe I need to figure out how to beat it with my play before I start changing any Pokemon. God, I hate Smeargle. I need to improve my gameplay. I don't think that I'm using any of my Pokemon to their full potential, and aside from Incineroar and Calyrex, there are very obvious ways that I'm just consistently making mistakes. Iron Hands, I owe you an apology. I was not familiar with your game. Before NAIC, I thought that this Pokemon would definitely be mid, but now I see that I have severely underestimated it, especially since I taught it close combat to smack around opponents' restricted mons. I have to stop rushing to immediately replace a Pokemon the second that something goes wrong. At this point, I figured out ways to deal with both Amoonguss and Smeargle with just my playing alone. And importantly, I didn't need to drop any of my Pokemon to do it. I have created a bit of a silly problem for myself. I am winning too much. Yesterday, I played a few high ladder games, and then I got a bit scared that my account was going to start attracting unwanted attention, so I made a new alt, and I went 21-1. The only loss was to a Koraidon player that I definitely could have beaten, too. Farigiraf even almost won me a game that I was trying to lose. I do have an actual problem, though. Just like I realized, other people have started figuring out that max speed Calyrex Shadow is mandatory. So now I'm speed tying other Calyrex. This is tough because other Calyrex are running two main Terra types, Normal making them immune to Astro Barrage, and Fairy who are running Calm Mind over Nasty Plot. If I get unlucky with speed ties, both of these Calyrex give my Water one trouble. If I drop Wild Charge on Iron Hands for Heavy Slam, Iron Hands can hit both terastallized Calyrex for super effective damage. As everyone else's teams become more and more refined, I'm realizing something. My team can lose to every single restricted Pokemon, and in practice, I've lost to nearly all of them at least once. But that's not a problem, because even though I can lose every matchup, it doesn't mean that I should or that I will at Worlds. Right now, most of my matchups feel neutral to slightly in my favor. This means that I don't have any easy auto wins, but also that I don't have any severe losing matchups. What determines the winner will be who plays better. And with the time I still have, I can focus on mastering this team. My Pokemon won't win the game for me, but I can win the game for me. And that's exactly where I want to be. Things are going great. I've been having trouble with Terra Fairy Miraidon, but I think that I could add Sludge Bomb Amoonguss in order to solve the problem. It's definitely not Sludge Bomb. This feels stupid to say, but I don't know. Is Amoonguss weak? Is that insane? It's just that Miraidon Farigiraf is so hard to deal with. I've got the solution for Miraidon. Sludge Bomb Amoonguss mid. Terra Ground Farigiraf. Terra Ground Farigiraf is mid, and Amoonguss is doing nothing. Maybe I could use Rillaboom or Ogerpon Cornerstone, but I don't like Ogerpon, and Rillaboom still has that Assault Vest problem. I don't know what I'm doing. Things are not going great. I somehow messed up my neck when I was sleeping last night, and I've lost a lot of games today. As you might expect, the pain is unbearable. And to make matters worse, my neck really does hurt. Ow. But the real pain is the team. See, I said I only wanted to use strong Pokemon, but right now, I've got a Pokemon that isn't feeling strong. And it breaks my heart to say it, but it's Glue Trap. Amoonguss is one of the strongest Pokemon in history. But right now, on this team, it feels weak. But when I start considering other options, I get stuck. The issue is that I really need a Grass-type Pokemon to make sure I have enough Pokemon immune to opposing Amoonguss and to give me another electric resistance. But the only other Grass-type Pokemon that's going to work on my team is Rillaboom, who not only results in triple Fake Out, which feels redundant, but also fights with Iron Hands over the Assault Vest. I think I might need to take a break for a couple of days. I feel like I'm stretching myself a little bit too thin here trying to find the perfect solution, and it's really hurting my neck. Today, I went on a really bad showdown bender for like 2 hours, just playing terribly on tilt. One of the rules I set for myself when I was starting this process was to not over ladder, and it turns out some rules were, in fact, not meant to be broken. Today has shaken my confidence a lot more than I would like, and that's a big problem because my whole goal is to go into Worlds with Pokemon that let me play the way that I want to. If the strongest Pokemon can't do that, what can? I feel like I'm stuck in this endless spiral. Have you ever heard of the Ouroboros? It's a snake that endlessly eats its own tail. I feel like I'm chasing my own wolf tail forever. Every fix I make ends up feeling like I'm trying to plug a hole in a leaky, sinking, hole-filled boat. I try Sludge Bomb Amoonguss to fix my Terra Fairy Miraidon matchup, but losing Pollen Puff makes me weaker to everything else. Terra Ground Farigiraf for Electric Miraidon makes me weaker against Chi-Yu. I leave for Finland in about a week, and I honestly don't have that much more time to play beforehand. I need to get the next 3 weeks of work done before I go so that I don't have to worry while I'm there. I wanted to have a rock-solid, nearly complete team by the time that I left. Instead, I'm stuck circling the drain, chasing my own tail. Round and round the Pokemon go. Where they stop, I don't know, but I can't give up. Even though it's hard, Worlds is too important for me to throw in the towel when there's still plenty of time left. It pains me to do it, but it's time to admit something hard. Amoonguss just isn't working. And I don't know what the replacement is, but I've got to try something. A few days ago, I had this idea that's a little bit out there. Clear Amulet, Taunt, Rillaboom. Just the thought of it makes me grimace. I just feel like intuitively I know it's not going to work. But I'm not sure that I trust my instincts today, given the headspace that I'm in. So let's listen to the ideas of Wolf from a few days ago. Maybe he was cooking. He might have been cooking. Today's the last day before I leave for Finland, and I am feeling 100% totally bleh. Taunt Rillaboom has actually been working against a bunch of the restricted Pokemon. It kind of feels like a Swiss Army knife packed with tools. Taunt, Grassy Terrain, Priority, Fake Out. Clear Amulet did end up feeling kind of fake, so I switched to Citrus Berry, and I'm getting deja vu. Taunt Rillaboom is working right now, but wasn't Amoonguss working for a bit too? Didn't I think that Terra Ground Farigiraf was going to solve all of my problems? I said I was done using tools from the back of the shelf, but is this Rillaboom a Swiss Army knife? Or just a bunch of random utensils I shoved into a paper bag and tied together with yet another band-aid? Obviously, I'm not where I want to be, but if there is anything that can get me back on track, it's spending some good quality time with my friends. And what better place to do it than in the beautiful fjords and valleys of Finland?
Hello, my hair looks dumb. Well, that's not unusual. It's day 1 of the Finland boot camp. It's July 10th. I left July 8th. Got in yesterday afternoon because my flight was delayed, and then made it to the night before falling asleep. So it's the morning. I'm recording this at 10:30 a.m. I found the lake. I'm very excited. There's a little dock. I'm very, very happy about that. I told you guys I was going for a walk around the yard, but really I was looking for the lake and I found it. So that's good. We just had a meeting at 10 a.m. to talk about our kind of like initial structure and figuring out what we want to do. Talked about goals and stuff like that. I'm really excited for this. I'm feeling good. There's a lot of work that I want to do. Like, so much so that even 2 full weeks, like just working on preparing for Worlds, I'm not even sure I'll have enough time to do everything. But it's also really important, I think, for me to take breaks and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just it's interesting to be here at the start where there is such a clear mountain of work, right? And I think what's scary is that with Pokemon, you never know if the work you put in is going to amount to a good finish. And if you don't get a good finish, I guess I'm kind of finished right now. If you don't get a good finish, then it can sometimes feel like you did all the work for nothing, or like it was wasted. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting kind of being here at the start of what could be a journey that leads me to be the world champion or to a disappointing finish. And so it's just like one of the things about Pokemon, where you don't know how things are going to turn out. So that's it for me. More updates maybe later, maybe I'll forget. Probably I'll forget. Bye-bye.
After a longer travel day than expected, I finally made it to Finland. My goal during the 2 weeks that I'm here is to boot camp with two of my dearest friends, who also happen to be two of the best Pokemon players that I know, Dr. Aaron Trailer and Aaron Cybertron Zeng. We'll also have just 4 short days with another of my best friends, Marcus, as he flies over from Germany for an abridged boot camp of his own. That's happening next weekend. This morning, the Aarons and I set our goals for the boot camp, and to keep myself accountable, I'm continuing my note-taking, this time by hand, in this matching notebook that my girlfriend had made for all 3 of us. You can see the restricted Pokemon in the little letters here. I end up taking a lot of notes. I posted them all on the Patreon if you are curious about watching the team develop over my time here in Finland. Now, here are my personal goals for this boot camp. 1. Leave with a near final team. That means moves, Terra types, and even the stats should be 95% final by the time that I'm done here. Luckily for me, I do think that I'm pretty close to this already. I've had this version of the team for a couple days, and my win rate has been through the roof. Now that I'm here, I can put it through some final tests. This should mean that I have a lot of time for my next goal: create concrete, detailed game plans for the big 7 restricted Pokemon. Ideally, I would like to map out flowcharts for every common archetype, pre-planning the first 2 or 3 turns of every matchup that I'm likely to play against at Worlds. This is going to take a ton of work, a lot of time spent thinking, and a staggering amount of play versus elite players for each different restricted Pokemon. Luckily for me, I've got 3 of them within arm's reach. Literally. Since splitting up a few weeks ago, we've each gone on our separate journeys to find the Pokemon that feel best to us. And now we're reuniting with our own unique treasures. Aaron Trailer has become a master of Miraidon, and we've got Aaron Zamazentatron Zeng too. Marcus is still exploring different options and hasn't finished locking in yet. His goal for the few days he has with us here will be to leave knowing which restricted he's using, and ideally to have an idea of how he wants to use it. 3. I want to master my team. I know I was just talking about having preset game plans, even planning moves in advance, but for me, that's just a part of being good enough to win Worlds. These set game plans are the foundation, but in Pokemon, things never go to plan. So I need to be able to improvise when I need to, operating fluidly and utilizing every Pokemon to its fullest potential, even when I'm in a situation that I've never seen before. Of all my goals, I think that this one is by far the most difficult. It's extremely hard to master something that is constantly changing, and in Pokemon, things never stand still. So to even have a chance of pulling this off, I need to spend next to 0 time team building and next to all the rest of the time studying the game. 4th and final, I want to work on my predictions. That probably sounds a little silly because you might think that I'm really good at making reads, but actually that's not the case. The style that I've developed when it comes to this game is one that almost never guesses what the opponent is going to do and instead tries to cover for every possible move at all times. When I'm backed into a corner and forced to predict, I actually normally get it wrong because I just don't do it very often. I do not think that I can win the World Championships without making a single read. I don't want to change my playstyle completely, as clearly what I've been doing has been working, but getting more comfortable in the situations where there isn't one optimal move is going to be a focus for me while I'm here. But today, I want to take it easy. Even though I am very serious about Worlds, I want to treat my time in Finland like at least a partial vacation and enjoy being in this cool country with some of my best friends. I want to jump in the lake, go running, swim in the lake, read outside, go in the lake, experience Finnish food. Did I mention that I want to go in the lake? These first 2 days have been a bit of a false start. I woke up yesterday feeling terrible. The jet lag is still booming me, and I slept awfully because of it, and I do not do well on no sleep. So I decided to try the classic natural remedy, Pokemon Showdown, and I ended up going on a 2-hour long bender. This is the exact opposite of what I'm supposed to be doing. Mindless button mashing while exhausted is only going to make me feel worse. And it's not like I'm learning anything from these unfocused games. This is supposed to be my training arc, and I've watched enough anime to know that a crucial part of training is what you eat. I want to be dining on only the finest practice, sticking to my diet of high quality analysis and VOD review. Spamming Showdown games is the equivalent of prepping for the big game on a buffet of deep fried Twinkies and sewer water. Even worse, Marcus got in today. It is great to see him, but we have such limited time while he's here. I just can't afford to be throwing it away like this. I asked Marcus to play a set with me to try and get me back on track, and I lost. Now, obviously, Marcus is a great player, and he's definitely beaten me more than I've beaten him over the years. But I should be far more prepared right now than he is, given I've been using this team for over a month, and he's still shopping around. I wanted our set to recenter me, but I just can't seem to catch a break. I'm off balance. I'm even starting to doubt Calyrex. Should I pivot to Miraidon? No, I can do something else. Something better. Go in the lake. M-I-L-L. Man, I love lake. It is so much better than I could have imagined before I got here. Here's the thing. I live in DC, and what you need to know about DC in July is that it is a swamp. It's not just hot, it's humid. It's so bad that your body starts sweating before you even get outside. And what you need to know about me is that I hate being sweaty. I'd rather be like regretful or morose than sweaty. And my very normal feelings are part of the reason that we came to Finland in the first place. The weather here is so beautiful. It's like 76, no humidity, no bugs. And there's the lake. I love being in the water. It's like if being sweaty was a good thing. Now, unfortunately, the only time that I really felt good today was when I was underwater, but I did feel really good. It's just so centering, floating around, the only person in this serene, beautiful space. I'm gonna go in the lake every day, especially when I need to clear my head. And if I'm feeling extra indulgent, maybe I'll go in the hot tub after with my friends. But back to Pokemon. I spent today working on my Miraidon matchup. Tomorrow, I play in a tournament hosted by one of the largest online grassroots organizations. This is a massive tournament, and it'll also be my first opportunity to experience the new tournament structure we'll be using for Worlds. With thousands of dollars in prizes on the line, many Worlds competitors will be there and taking it very seriously. So this will be my first real test for this version of the team, the version I very well might bring to Worlds. My goal is to do well, but not too well, since I don't want the team getting too much attention. I want to finish just one win short of making the final bracket, and if I have to, I'll lose on purpose in order to get there. Well, I did not need to lose on purpose, because I could not win even enough games to make it out of the first day while trying my hardest to win. I finished the tournament with 4 wins and 3 losses. Now, keep in mind, I regularly enter online tournaments to use fun, silly teams for content. My worst finish in one of these online tournaments, using teams that have absolutely no business winning, was 4 wins and 3 losses. That was with my 2013 Worlds team, which is my worst team ever, and a team over a decade outdated. In every other one of these online tournaments that I've entered, I've always made it past the first phase, a feat I could not accomplish with a team that I am planning on bringing to the World Championships. I feel so incredibly awful. My entire strategy for this boot camp was predicated on the feeling that my team was close to done, but I have to face the truth. It doesn't work. But there is no time to mope about it. I need to take what time I do have and find a way to fix things. I think I know where the weak link is. The bird. I've been struggling to make Pelipper feel like a good Pokemon on this team, and I am starting to realize that the reason for that is that Pelipper just isn't a good Pokemon. Yeah, it has some positive matchups against Koraidon and anything that relies on spread moves, but its base stats are just so terrible. It's not realistic to expect Pelipper to keep up in a format with Pokemon like these. I drop food, I'm dropping you. I'm also feeling iffy about Rillaboom. My old suspicion that triple fake out is overkill feels correct. While it is nice for controlling the board, I'm lacking upfront damage, especially versus opposing Incineroar. I can't afford all of Incineroar, Rillaboom, and Iron Hands. There's just too much overlap in their stats and in the roles that they play. So I have 2 Pokemon slots available, and I've made a list of what these 2 Pokemon need to do. Here's what I've got. The most obvious addition is a fellow long-necked friend for Farigiraf, Raging Bolt, who's got the perfect typing for all the restricted matchups I need help with and gives me another Urshifu resist. But it's not perfect. It's really weak to Amoonguss and Smeargle, and on top of that, it's got anti-synergy with Iron Hands since they're both electric type. I don't think that it can work. Marcus has a suggestion for the 2 Pokemon that do tick pretty much every box, at least on paper. Chenpao with Ice Spinner for terrain control, and Amoonguss for redirection, a water resistance, and Spore. I haven't really considered Chenpao since I started working on the team before NAIC, but Marcus might be onto something here. I'll spend tomorrow testing it out. For now, I need to crash, and hopefully, finally get a good night's sleep. Maybe the answer will come to me in my dreams. It doesn't work. I tried all day yesterday. I tried everything that I could think of, and it just isn't coming together. Panic is setting in. I've spent months working on this, and now, exactly 1 month before Worlds, it's all falling apart. No matter how good you are, you cannot win Worlds without a team. And despite my best efforts, despite all of my successes this season, here I am, coming up short once again. Preparing for Worlds is a lot of pressure, especially when you're the most visible player in the game. And there's a part of me that, especially given how things have gone the last couple of years, feels like maybe trying this hard isn't worth it. I have already won Worlds. I have nothing to prove to anyone. If I didn't care so much, if I didn't work so hard, I'd never have to experience this horrible, crushing feeling of failure. In a way, I'm opting into my own undoing. What's the point? But by asking the question, I get my answer. I do it because I care, because it's important to me. Maybe it isn't rational, maybe it's not always fun or easy, but for whatever reason, it matters to me. So even though it would be so much easier to walk away and give up on this year, telling myself 2024 was actually for suckers and 2025 is the year that's definitely going to be for wolves, that's not the kind of person I am. I will give up when I am eliminated from Worlds and not 1 second sooner. But while this is all well and good, it doesn't solve my current problem. My team doesn't work, and something has to change. It's time to look for inspiration. Remember that circle snake we talked about earlier, the Ouroboros? On first glance, maybe it seems like a sad image to you. He'll never be free. But the Ouroboros is not stuck. He's constantly reinventing himself, a reminder of the cycle of rebirth. He is the symbol of alchemy, the art of transmuting the mundane into something shining and new. I need to reinvent myself, or this team at the very least. I need to let it all go and start fresh. Dr. Aaron Traylor has a saying when it comes to team building. If you love something, let it go. If it's meant to be, it'll come back. He says this whenever I remove Incineroar from my team. I've been trying to force my square team through a round hole, and it's not working. I need to let everything I've been working on go. And if it's really the team that can win me the World Championships, believe it'll find its way back to me. So, as of right now, I do not know a single Pokemon I am bringing to Worlds. Emotionally, I feel almost calm. No use fighting against the Riptide. Time to make the best of what I have. Worlds is in 1 month. That's still a lot of time. Prep time is important, but I remember my last 2 Worlds all too well. I know just how impossible it is to do well at Worlds with a team that fights every battle uphill. There's no use panicking about how much is left to climb. The next step is finding a team or at least a direction. I can do this. I'm surrounded by friends in a beautiful house by a lake. Marcus is going to spend tomorrow fully working with me on team building. And most importantly, despite everything that's happened, I am still Wolf Glick. For the first time since I got to Finland, I finally slept well last night. And maybe it's related. I figured out the team with a lot of help from Marcus. The two of us spent all day putting our heads together, and somehow, miraculously, we got it. For real this time. No more fake outs, no more doubts. I have the team I will bring to the Pokemon World Championships, and the team that Marcus will bring to Worlds too. He wasn't sold in the team before, but after yesterday, he's all in. Okay, do you want to see? It probably looks familiar, I know, but fundamentally, this is a different team than the one I've been using the past few months, even though it's technically 5 of the same 6 Pokemon that I brought to NAIC. Have you ever heard of the ship of Theseus? If you replace all the pieces of a ship one by one, is it the same ship? I don't know what the smart philosophical answer is, but I can tell you that the answer to the question of the ship of Wolfseus is it's a different team. In the primordial ocean, this team was reborn. I had to break both it and myself back down to the most basic level so I could build it all again. What I have now might be new in quotation marks, but even though from the outside it looks similar, this team has changed enough that it's transformed into something new. Okay, but what about the elephant in the room? How did I end up with such a similar looking team when it wasn't working before? Well, when I went back to square one, I did the same metagame analysis that I did when I was first starting out, and I noticed a lot of similar points in favor of using Calyrex Shadow. It's fast, it hits hard, and it can snowball games. But the metagame has some new threats now that weren't present before. Mostly super specially defensive Pokemon like Assault Vest and Calm Mind Kyogre, Calm Mind Terra Fairy Lunala, and Calm Mind Terrapagos teams have become stronger as well. And they all really prey on Calyrex Shadow. I've been struggling with all of them. Terra Water is still a great defensive Terra type against Calyrex Ice, Kyogre, Urshifu Water, Koraidon, Incineroar, and more. But when looking at this now more optimized format, I realized something. Terra Blast does not win me any games on its own, even though it is still nice to have generally. And Calyrex actually gets a move that can help me with all these specially defensive walls. Psyshock. It's a special attack that uses the target's physical defense stat. Now, this is just changing one move, but it makes a world of difference, as this one move swings matchups that I was heavily disadvantaged in before way back into my favor. I've also figured out which two fake out users I need: Incineroar and Rillaboom. Iron Hands is good, but it's the weakest link of the three, especially now that I have Psyshock to help handle Terrapagos. With Iron Hands gone, Rillaboom can come back and hold the vest he had so cruelly ripped away from him. And with the right item back in place, he feels much stronger. Incineroar was always going to be here. It's the strongest Pokemon in the game, and it's an incredible partner for Calyrex. And to complete the Fire Water Grass core, I'm adding back a far stronger water type than Pelipper, Urshifu. With the changes I've made, Urshifu is finally in a position where it can look like the stupidly broken Pokemon it was designed to be. Farigiraf is the only Pokemon I can have on the team that will give me a huge edge in the mirror match against opposing Calyrex Shadow. Winning against it otherwise would require either multiple Pokemon slots or a change in Terra type on my Calyrex to something like normal or dark. I don't want to do either, so I'm keeping Farigiraf. It's also starting to feel kind of like my signature Pokemon at this point, with this strong offensive set that I really love that never really picked up steam. But I did bring all these Pokemon to NAIC, albeit with different sets, which means the sixth and final Pokemon is the only new addition. And in fact, it's a Pokemon that I've never used before: Raging Bolt. It's one of the strongest Pokemon in the format, and it's exactly what I need here. Without Pelipper, I need more help against Koraidon, and Raging Bolt not only threatens a KO with Dragon Pulse, it also resists the fire moves that Koraidon uses. Raging Bolt gives me another strong offensive special attacker to rely on if anything happens to my Calyrex, and it's slow enough to work inside Trick Room in a pinch, while also having access to the signature move, Thunderclap, which moves before most other moves and does very good damage. It's not an obvious solution, but by taking a step back, I was able to figure out that it is the right one. The good news is that since I salvaged most of the ship from the wreckage of past vessels, I'm pretty familiar with the pieces. And so even though I don't have any explicit game plans with these 6 Pokemon yet, I think I can get back up to speed soon. We're changing locations today to another lake, so I can't really do much more prep now. The Errands and I dropped Marcus off at the airport earlier today, and then we did some sightseeing around Helsinki. At this point, I've been here for a week, and things have not really gone as planned. That's fine. I'm with my friends, we've been cooking good food, I'm in a beautiful place, and the placid surface of the lake is a smooth and unbroken mirror. One more week in Finland. Time to lock in. Oh, yesterday was so good and I felt on top of the world, and I just can't believe I took it all for granted. Remember how I said we're moving locations? Well, this new place that we're staying is at a different lake and it's over an hour away, and it sucks. The water only goes up to my shins and the entire bottom of the lake is just this thick mud that I can't walk in either barefoot or even in sandals. I'm actually devastated. Oh, but the team is working. Yeah, that's all right. It's actually working very well. The only issue is because I have never used Raging Bolt before, I have absolutely no idea how to run it. It's a Pokemon with a lot of different sets that you can use, and finding the right one isn't obvious. I could run Life Orb or Booster Energy or Leftovers. I could give it Terra Fairy or Terra Electric, or maybe even a more niche Terra like Bug or Poison. I could run it super fast or make it super bulky. It would have been nice to have this figured out already, but I'm sure that getting more comfortable with my new long neck friend will lead me to the answers to my questions one way or another. Raging Bolt has been amazing. It's a complete success, but it needs a name. And after giving it some thought, I have one. I'll nickname my Raging Bolt Successor, not only because I want it to bring me success, but also because of the legacy it's inheriting. Raging Bolt has become a staple against 3 primary restricted Pokemon: Koraidon, Miraidon, and Zamazenta. The plan is to keep it on the field, sticking around for as long as possible, and using its great damage output to put things into range of Thunderclap and Astral Barrage. Now that I know what it needs to do, I've landed on a version of Bolt that revolves around the concept of sticking around for a while and being consistent. At this point, I think that all the sets are nearly final. I need to optimize the spreads just a little more, but I'd say the team is about 95% done. Sure, it is 3 days until I leave Finland and about 10 days later than I wanted to get here, but I finally have my feet on steady ground. It's the last day of boot camp, and I can say confidently that nothing went the way that I expected it to. There were points where I almost lost hope. If I'd had to go on this journey without my friends or without the lake, I really might not have pulled it together. Instead, I was able to persevere and renew my team and my confidence as I enter the final stretch before Worlds. Much like the theme in Scarlet and Violet, this was really about the journey before the destination. Although, yeah, the destination is coming up with Worlds in 23 days, and that kind of matters too. But if I've been off on a treasure hunt, I think I'm coming back with some pretty valuable stuff. But rather than just going off of vibes, let's assess the 4 goals I set at the beginning of boot camp. And since Scarlet and Violet have a school theme, I'll be giving myself a grade in each one. Goal number 1, finalize the team. Yeah, well, I mean, I got there in the end. I did finalize it. Now, it did take quite a while and I had to do a lot of running around, but in the end, the team is finalized. I got there. I figured out the 6 Pokemon that I'm bringing to Worlds, so I'm going to give myself an A-. Let's be fair. I think an A- is generous. Goal number 2, develop game plans and flow charts for all of the big 7 restricted Pokemon. I would say I have partially achieved this. While my team has been changing more than I would like, there are pieces that have stayed consistent. So all the prep I've been doing hasn't been for nothing. There is still a fair bit of work left, and I need to spend a bit more time on Zamazenta, Koraidon, and certain hard Trick Room teams built around Calyrex Ice, but I'd say that this is about 80% complete. B. Goal 3, develop a mastery of my team. I'm getting there. I said at the start that this was going to be really hard if I changed the team at all, and I've been changing the team at all, and so that has made this really hard. On the plus side, I was right, I guess. That being said, it is now finally starting to click a little bit. I'm able to play the team a lot more fluidly than when I first got here. Back then, I was leading haunts like every single game, and now I'm able to identify spots where I'm not bringing it at all. So I'm not quite where I want to be, but I would say I did okay, all things considered. C+. But of course, there was a 4th goal, and frankly, it's the one that I didn't do so good in. Focusing on predictions. Yeah, if we're sticking with the metaphor, I basically didn't even show up to class. And of course, I could beat myself up over this, but the truth is that with the team changing around so much, this was never going to be possible. The problem is, that's a pretty big failing grade, and my other grades weren't phenomenal. Am I even going to be able to graduate? Hang on, there's one more class on this report card. My last secret goal was to really enjoy these 2 weeks with my friends. And I'm happy to say we all passed with flying colors. I may have decided that I'm relying on myself this season, but that has never meant I'll be doing it alone. Funnily enough, these 2 weeks really did feel like school in some ways. The best parts of it. We studied together, we took tests, we stayed up late working on group projects. But we also laughed together and ate together and jumped in lakes together. We even got the yearbook photos to prove it. Thanks, Finland. I leave you ready to take on the hardest challenge yet, going back to a land without lakes, and the second hardest challenge yet, the Pokemon World Championships. I'm back in the United States. From here until I leave, my focus is on training. I'm playing tournaments, drilling with friends, and tweaking my team, improving every day. The days are starting to blur together as the team hurdles towards completion, and I hurdle towards world champion material. Each day, I improve the team that's coming with me to the Pokemon World Championships by just a little bit, until finally I can say the words I've been waiting to say this entire time. My team for the Pokemon World Championships is complete. I set a task for myself this season. Only use the strongest Pokemon. This team does just that. I wanted to bet on myself this year, so every single move on this team has 100% accuracy. I believe I am the best player in the entire world, so I want to leave as little chance as possible. The road here was a bit windy. You've come with me through the twists and turns that finally led us here, to the 6 Pokemon I really think can win Worlds. They've each changed a lot over the course of the journey, but here they are now in their final forms. Calyrex Shadow, nicknamed Haunts. Despite most everyone else writing it off, this is the Pokemon I believe is going to bring me another World Championship victory. It's the only restricted Pokemon I've bet on this entire season, and even when I wanted to walk away and give up, Calyrex always convinced me to bet on it again. In my eyes, it is the strongest restricted Pokemon, and I intend to prove it. Terra Water is here to shift its defensive relationships and give it an edge against Kyogre, Koraidon, and Calyrex Ice. The Covert Cloak stops Fake Out after terrestrializing and blocks speed drops from Icy Wind, as well as random burns and freezes from moves with secondary effects. Adding Psyshock when things looked bleak transformed Calyrex's previously abysmal matchups against the specially defensive restricted Pokemon. Now, I've harped on the importance of running Calyrex at max speed for most of this journey, but what about the other stats? Well, the HP investment gets it up to 192 HP stat. But why this number specifically? Well, I have Rillaboom on this team, whose grassy terrain heals all of my Pokemon by 1/16 of their total health at the end of every turn. In Pokemon, you always round down, so by getting Calyrex to exactly 192 HP stat, it'll heal 12 health every single turn there's grass to munch, compared to 11. That might only be 1 more HP per turn, but think about all the times your Pokemon have just barely lived a hit. Here at the World Championships, you need every optimization you can get. Calyrex doesn't have many stat points left, but we're going to make them count. By raising its special defense by just 2 points, it can consistently survive Raging Bolt Draco Meteor, even when its special attacks got a boost from the booster energy. The remaining points go into special attack. But this isn't just a dump of everything left over. Instead, it gets Calyrex to a very specific breakpoint, where +4 Astro Barrage will KO Assault Vest Rillaboom and have a decent shot at KOing Calyrex Ice after they terrestrialize. Now, you're probably thinking, how the heck does this guy intend to get to +4 special attack? That's a lot. Well, next up, Incineroar. When everything else was in turmoil, Incineroar always stayed by my side. Honestly, I never considered not using Incineroar. It's the strongest Pokemon of all time. I named this Incineroar Redemption, which might seem silly as some of you might know that I don't really like it. But here's the thing. I had a lot of success this season, and a lot of it was with Incineroar. And actually, I am a little embarrassed about it, but I am technically the most successful Incineroar player of all time. If Incineroar helps me win Worlds, then I am willing to let bygones be bygones. It will have redeemed itself in my eyes. Incineroar is the strongest partner Pokemon Calyrex could ask for. It weakens opponents with Intimidate, it can remove items and do damage with Knockoff, it buys time for Calyrex to set up with Fake Out, and it lets me bring Calyrex and my other Pokemon in safely with Parting Shot, while also further weakening my opponents. My Incineroar is holding Safety Goggles, which makes it immune to powder moves like Spore, Sleep Powder, and Rage Powder. Amoonguss could otherwise send my whole team to Sleepy Town, USA, Viewers paying close attention may have noticed that I only mentioned 3 of Incineroar's 4 moves, but the last move I've chosen is one not favored by most other players. A move that, for some reason, Incineroar received as a buff in Scarlet and Violet, because obviously it was in need of helping hand. This move provides a 50% damage increase to Incineroar's partner. All my Pokemon can technically benefit from this, but truthfully, it's here for one specific reason: to boost Calyrex even further beyond after a nasty plot. Remember how I said Calyrex Shadow is trained so that at +4 it could knock out Assault Vest Rillaboom and Calyrex Ice after they Terra? This can win me games on the spot, but the downside is that getting to +4 is nearly impossible without taking massive risks. So in most games, it shouldn't be relevant, except that a +2 Calyrex with a Helping Hand boost is exactly as strong as a +4 Calyrex. In other words, Helping Hand Incineroar enables Calyrex to pick up shocking KOs that it would otherwise have no business getting, which then snowballs into more special attack boosts thanks to the Grim Neigh ability. Since Incineroar is here entirely for support, I'm focusing all of its stat points in its bulk. Incineroar is trained to survive Calyrex Ice, Glacial Lance, and a high horsepower, while still having enough bulk on the special side to survive powerful burst moves like Raging Bolt Booster Energy Draco Meteor and Specs Terrapagos Terra Star Storm. That's all well and good, but how fast should my Incineroar be? There's good reason to train it a little bit in speed so you can actually get the jump on other Incineroar and fake them out before they do the same to you. But I'm actually going to go in the complete opposite direction. I learned at NAIC that Calyrex Ice inside of Trick Room was a problem because it suddenly became faster than all of my Pokemon. My solution is an Incineroar that has the absolute lowest speed stat possible, a number you can only get by intentionally lowering your stats. It is worth noting that if Calyrex Ice chooses to be as slow as possible, Incineroar will still end up faster, but many of them prefer to be a little faster in order to get the edge in the mirror match. By making Incineroar slower, aka faster inside of Trick Room, I can do stuff like knock off on the turn they set Trick Room up, and then Parting Shot before they can attack, weakening them now that I've removed the Clear Amulet. Terra Ghost gives me an out against my opponent's faster Incineroar, since I can become immune to Fake Out in a pinch. Between the Terra type and Farigiraf blocking priority moves, I think I can get away with always having the slower cat, and I can take advantage of this by using Parting Shot after my opponent's Incineroar, letting me see which Pokemon they bring in before having to select one of my own. Next up, Urshifu. It has one job: hit hard and make Game Freak regret their hubris for ever creating a Pokemon this broken. That's 2 jobs. Urshifu is pretty straightforward. When you're this strong, you don't need to overcomplicate things. The Focus Sash lets him stick around longer, even with all the monstrous Pokemon in the format. And when you're holding the Focus Sash, you don't need to waste any stat points in the staying alive stats. Urshifu has no interest in the stats that don't result in the opponent's seeing God. Speaking of, Terra Stellar was chosen because it has no defensive applications and lets all of Urshifu's moves do more damage. While normally Terra Water would be fine because you're clicking water moves most of the time, Terra Stellar gives close combat a boost too, letting it do more damage to Terrapagos, who I need to respect after losing to 2 of them at NAIC. This is the same Urshifu I've been using all year, nicknamed Slippery Dog. I don't want to replay the games to get a new one, especially after it took me 10 hours to get Calyrex. I've spent so much time preparing for Worlds that the idea of grinding through a single-player campaign again doesn't sound super appealing right now. Pokemon is a really complex game that hurts my brain sometimes. Luckily, Urshifu is focused on other muscles. Is the brain a muscle? I don't actually know. Next up is a Pokemon that had to fight really hard in order to earn its spot on the team: Rillaboom. Rillaboom was the first Pokemon I dropped after NAIC, and even when it found its way back onto the team, I kept inventing newer and even stupider ways of using it. I tried Citrus Berry, Clear Amulet. Heck, I even tried running it at max speed at one point. In the end, I found my way back to the one set that brings out Rillaboom's full potential, thanks to the ever-in-demand Assault Vest. Rillaboom is the Gorilla Glue that holds so many of my matchups together. With its Grassy Surge ability and its immense special bulk, it's a nightmare for the powerful special attacking restricted Pokemon that rely on their terrain and their burst damage. This is only possible because the Assault Vest increases Rillaboom's special bulk by a staggering 50%. Like Incineroar, Fake Out helps Calyrex get off to the races, and enables the Fake Out Blender, where you bait an opponent into protecting in front of the first Fake Out user and use the momentum to switch in the second one, leaving your opponent caught with their pants down. Unlike Incineroar, Rillaboom can actually do damage. It has Wood Hammer for huge burst, and Grassy Glide for a bit less damage, but with the benefit of increased priority. Another thing that Rillaboom shares with Incineroar is the ability to reposition, with U-turn allowing me to bring my frailer Pokemon in after the opponent has already moved for the turn. Rillaboom does have a problem though. It's intended to be the one Pokemon that can really shut down Miraidon on this team, but Miraidon is really strong. So strong, in fact, that with a Helping Hand boost, Rillaboom goes down to Draco Meteor even when Miraidon isn't getting a boost from Hadron Engine. Or I should say, the Rillaboom that I brought to NAIC would go down. Now, I'm focusing almost the entirety of Rillaboom's stat points into its special bulk. And thanks to this gargantuan effort and all the zinc I've shoved down its throat, Rillaboom can now survive this Pachirisu level threat. This completely changes the matchup against Miraidon teams, as if they try and go for Helping Hand Draco Meteor now, it'll result in a near auto loss for them on turn 1. Of course, doing this means I need to sacrifice a lot of speed and power, but I'm okay with that. Rillaboom still hits hard thanks to the grassy terrain and the power of Wood Hammer, and I have Armor Tail to block opposing Fake Out in a pinch. Terra Fire gives me resistances to fire moves from Chi-Yu, ice moves from Calyrex Ice and Chen Pao, and fairy moves from Fluttermane and Miraidon. On a more serious note, before Worlds, I learned that a viewer of mine had passed away unexpectedly. His partner reached out to tell me that he had always loved my videos, and he'd always said that if he won the lottery, he'd give competitive Pokemon a real shot. In his honor, I've nicknamed my Rillaboom Steve, so that, in a way, he could participate in Worlds too. The last returning member is Farigiraf, nicknamed In fact, he's not just returning from NAIC, he's returning all the way from Worlds last year. This is the Pokemon that feels most like my signature partner. It's the Pokemon that gets my team out ahead against all the other Shadow Rider teams in this horsey race. Last year, Farigiraf was a rarity, and that's certainly changed going into Worlds this time around, but everyone else is using a fully support-oriented Farigiraf, and that's not what is here for. He's here to scream. A lot. The Throat Spray item gives him a huge damage boost after using a sound move, and Hyper Voice is just that. Once he's done his vocal warm-ups, Psychic starts doing so much damage, you might think Farigiraf was the restricted Pokemon. But even though Farigiraf is mostly here to melt opponents' teams, it still supports the team by just being on the field, and sometimes by just threatening to be on the field. Because the Armor Tail ability blocks all priority moves, opponents are constantly dealing with a mind game of whether Farigiraf is lurking in the back. And even when Farigiraf isn't blocking priority moves or dealing massive damage, it can still use Trick Room to flip the battle on its head. Farigiraf's got exactly 224 HP, which for those of you who are either concerningly good at math or for some reason have every multiple of 16 memorized, know will give Farigiraf extra recovery every turn from grassy terrain, just like my Calyrex. It's got enough bulk to survive Body Press from Zamazenta even while Chen Pao's Sword of Ruin ability is active, and also Booster Energy Raging Bolt Draco Meteor. This leaves exactly enough special attack for Farigiraf to hit 165 stat, which is significant because it's what I'm used to. But I'm not used to the Terra type. Fairy is the best general Terra type on Farigiraf because of the dark resistance it provides, and it's the Terra type I've used every other time I've used Farigiraf, but not here. Instead, I've gone with Grass. This is a far worse defensive type. However, I've been having trouble with niche teams with Koraidon or Groudon, specifically when they're paired with Sleep Powder Chlorophyll Pokemon like Jumpluff and Venusaur. They keep putting my whole team to sleep. Without Pelipper, the matchup is just abysmal, like so bad that if they hit all their sleep powders, I automatically lose. I've decided to go with Terra Grass Farigiraf so that I at least have something I can do if I end up playing against one of these teams. This is a gamble. If I don't find myself against specific teams, it'll mean I've wasted my Terra. But I'm not willing to have any auto loss matchups, so it's a risk that I'm willing to take. This brings us to the final Pokemon. The one Pokemon I've never used before, Raging Bolt. Successor. I tried so many different Pokemon to try and open the door to the perfect team, and it was Raging Bolt who was the key that unlocked their potential. Its signature move, Thunderclap, is broken because it not only hits hard, it lets Bolt move first even when it isn't the fastest thing on the field. Thunderbolt does more damage and works even when the opponent doesn't go for an attacking move. The last attacking slot has to be a dragon move, and Raging Bolt has two good options to choose from: Draco Meteor and Dragon Pulse. Draco Meteor is a really strong move, as you've probably figured out, because several of my Pokemon are trained specifically to survive it, but it misses 10% of the time, and for me, that's not acceptable. Dragon Pulse is more consistent, not only because it always hits, but also because it doesn't lower Raging Bolt's special attack after connecting. Raging Bolt's Terra type can make or break the set, and I'm going with Fairy. Lots of players are using Terra Electric since it takes away your Ice and Fairy weaknesses, while also giving Thunderbolt and Thunderclap a damage boost. But here's the thing, Raging Bolt was put on the team so I'd have a good Pokemon to bring against Zamazenta, Miraidon, and Koraidon. And Fairy gives you either a key resistance, an immunity, or both. Because Raging Bolt already hits so hard, buying it an extra turn or two is normally going to result in more damage than getting an extra damage boost on one attack. Terra Fairy also has the added benefit of resisting both of Urshifu Dark's moves, a key threat to Calyrex. Raging Bolt has such good base stats that it's really hard to know how to train it, and since I've never used it before, it's not like I can rely on my instincts. My initial thought was to make it super fast, to give me the edge against opposing Raging Bolt, and to outspeed faster Incineroar. But after extensive testing, there's one key matchup I need help in: Ice Rider. My first priority was to survive Glacial Lance, which would be impossible on a normal Pokemon, but Raging Bolt isn't normal. There's a couple ways you can balance your HP and defense that will do this, but I found one that gets Raging Bolt over the threshold to maximize the recovery from grassy terrain. This does take a lot of my stat points, so I now have to choose between sacrificing either speed or power. This is a hard decision, until I remember that Thunderclap is a broken move. Now, this is not a catch-all. I will always have the slower Raging Bolt where Thunderclap isn't as effective, but I can turn this into an advantage if I set up Trick Room. I would rather have to work around a slower Bolt that still does damage, rather than a faster Bolt with a wet pool noodle for a neck. I've been working on this team for almost 3 months. I almost gave up on the team at my lowest moment, but finally, I can say that it's done. And I'm glad I stuck with it. I leave for Worlds tomorrow. There's no more time for changes. Good news, I don't want to change a single thing. I know that the team is good enough to win. The only question that remains is, am I? I've made it to Hawaii. It almost feels surreal. It's actually happening. Months of work all leading to this. I'm gonna get settled in my hotel, say hi to my friends, and get myself in the right headspace. I have made a decision that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. This year, I've decided that I won't be doing any pictures or signing any autographs until after I'm eliminated from the tournament. This is not because I had like a bad experience or something. Everybody is always super nice, but this year, I really want to focus on doing my best at Worlds. Listen, I really do my best to be my honest, authentic self on this channel, but as I'm sure that most of you can imagine, there is a difference between YouTuber Wolf and real life Wolf. I think this is actually healthy as the channel grows more and more. I think it's a good thing that there are some things I get to keep just for my personal life, but this does mean that there is a difference between content creator Wolf and competitor Wolf. Listen, I'm not like an actual real life celebrity, but within the competitive Pokemon space, I am well known. And one positive thing about this is that at tournaments, I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, not as a competitor, but as a creator. Maybe as someone who played a role in convincing them to try to go to the tournament in the first place. In these interactions, it's really important to me to focus on whoever I'm talking to learn more about their story, and to welcome them into the wonderful world of competitive Pokemon. But as a competitor, I really want to focus on me. To take the tournament as seriously as possible, I try to be really in touch with what I need in the moment. Do I need alone time to decompress from a tough win or to shake off a bad loss? Do I need to rethink a game plan based on how a match went? Am I hungry? Have I been drinking enough water? Do I want to talk to my friends to take some of the pressure off? At my best, I'm really focused entirely on me and my needs. But these two modes are at odds with each other. And while it is really important to me to be there for others, this is the Pokemon World Championships, and I want to put myself first. Pulling back the curtain a little bit, this makes me uncomfortable. I hate asking to be treated differently, and I don't want to give anybody the impression that I don't feel incredibly grateful to be in the spot that I am. Ultimately though, I think that getting comfortable doing things that I need to do for me, even when they're hard, is a part of being good enough to win the World Championships. One thing that's remained consistent over the 12 World Championships that I've competed in is the amount of prep work that I've done going in. Longtime viewers may remember that in 2016, when I won, I memorized a lot of damage calcs. In 2022, I spent more time preparing than ever before, though I did still crash and burn. As a competitor, it's my job to not overthink these types of failures, and to stay confident that this level of preparation is what it takes to win. Thinking back to 2016 is a pretty good reminder. This year, the type of prep work that I'm doing looks different. In 2016, Marcus and I built a long sheet with damage calcs that we memorized. But this year, we're going through every single matchup and writing down every game plan that we can. Marcus and I finished the spreadsheet that we've been putting together with matchup plans today, as much of it as we intend to do at the very least. I do wish we had a little more time to work on the Zamazenta and the hard trick room matchups, but wishing won't change anything now. It's been really hard to sleep. My nerves have just been really kicking in. It's just a strange feeling to work towards something for, months to a year, depending on how you look at it, and be standing right in the precipice of it finally happening, especially when you don't know how it's going to go. Today is the final day before Showtime. From the moment that I wake up tomorrow, there is only one goal in my mind: win Worlds. That means no Pokemon today. I instead spent it with friends that I only get to see a couple times a year. It's a good reminder that no matter how the weekend goes, I have a lot to be grateful for. I didn't sleep great again, but I feel surprisingly okay. There's almost this sense of calm that I haven't felt before. Not sure if that's a good sign or a bad omen. One way or another, I'll find out tomorrow. The Pokemon World Championships are finally here. I can't sleep. Whether it's the excitement or the nerves or just the knowledge that I'm standing on the precipice of either redemption or failure, I don't know. But it's 4 in the morning and I am wide awake. I feel calm. It's a different feeling that I'm used to. Normally, I feel more and more pressure building the closer I get to a tournament, until I get to let it all out through the games. This is different, but at least right now, I think that I prefer it. My head feels clearer than normal. And I think the reason is that for the first time in a while, I really feel like this year I did everything that I absolutely could. I have no regrets about my team, and I have enough experience to use it well. But that doesn't mean that I'll get a good result. There's so much out of your hands in a Pokemon tournament. The opponents you draw, the teams they're using, and how they match up against your team. And of course, all the luck inside of the game itself. You can't always control how well you do, but you can always control how well you prepare. And I think that this calmness comes from being able to honestly say, I did the best that I could. I grab a banana and head over to the venue to meet up with my friends to watch the opening ceremony. This is my 12th World Championships. So you might think that I'm used to it by now, but every time it still feels special. Walking into the venue and seeing the decorations that make each Worlds feel unique. Being surrounded by people who share my passion for this wonderful, crazy game. And knowing that in just a few hours, I will either be still fighting for the crown or dealing with yet another set of dashed dreams. It's exhilarating and terrifying, and it's a feeling that I only ever get here. As I watch the opening ceremony surrounded by my friends, I get hit with a wave of deja vu. I've been here before, in Hawaii at the World Championships, 12 years ago in 2012. It was my second season competing, and I ended up having a miracle run where I took Executor all the way to second place. It's funny to look back on. I was so much younger, so much greener. I had so much that I still hadn't figured out, and so much doubt. And yet, I still had the same goal, the same passion. I wanted to be the best in the world. In a way, it's nice. Even though I've changed a lot over those 12 years, this burning fire still connects me to my past selves. One final pep talk with my friends, with the people who have made every step of this journey worthwhile. And then we split. Even though we prepared for this tournament as a team, each of us has to fight our own individual battles now. As I head to my seat, I remind myself what I need to do. This tournament is using a brand new structure, the likes of which we've never used before. There's 3 phases. First, day 1. There are 8 rounds, and in order to advance, I need to win 6 of them. But the wins and losses carry over to tomorrow. In phase 2, there's 3 more rounds. And in the end, I need to win 9 out of my first 11 rounds in order to make it to the top cut. a single elimination bracket that's played out until there's only one player left standing, the world champion. Now, some players get to skip the first round of the day if they did well enough during the regular season. I could have earned one of these round 1 buys if I wanted to because my performance at the major events was good enough, but it would have required grinding local events, and my year was just so busy, I decided not to chase this. I figured that if round 1 is the difference between me winning or losing worlds in the first place, then I was probably never good enough to win anyway. But this may have been a mistake. See, the first round of worlds has begun something of a stumbling block for me. Since winning the world championships, I have lost every single round 1 of worlds with only one exception. For whatever reason, whether it be the nerves or the pressure or just not being warmed up, round 1 has become something of a personal kryptonite. But round 1 matters a lot right now. Every loss will carry over to the next phase and makes it that much harder to make it to the end. So right now, my first hurdle isn't to win 6 times, it's to win round 1. My opponent is from Peru. I haven't heard of them before, something that absolutely does not matter because we are at the Pokemon World Championships, and I am walking over to my table, surrounded by players who all could be the next one to raise that trophy. And the venue lights are very bright, and I am sitting down, and I am introducing myself to my opponent, and we are exchanging team sheets, and finally, I hear the words I've been waiting for since the last time I heard them. The Pokemon World Championships have now officially begun. My opponent's using a team centered around Terapagos, but not just any Terapagos. This one has the choice specs item, allowing it to fully skip the setup turn of Calm Mind, meaning it can do ridiculous damage from the get-go with its signature move, Terra Star Storm. Now, normally my Ghost-type Calyrex would match up well into a normal-type attacker that can't change its Terra type, but Terapagos isn't a normal type. It's the source of the whole Terrastal phenomenon in the first place, and when it terastalizes into its stellar type, Terra Starstorm becomes a stellar move that can't be resisted. There's no reducing this damage, especially when paired with Chi-Yu, who cuts down opponent's special defense even further thanks to its Beads of Ruin ability. And my restricted Pokemon can't get rid of either of them quickly, since neither of them care very much about either Psyshock or Astro Barrage. To make matters worse, this team also has Tornadus for speed control and weather control with both Sunny Day and Rain Dance, Urshifu for another damage source, Amoonguss for support, and a speed boosting Flutter Mane with Icy Wind and Taunt to both control the speed of the battle and deny Trick Room. I lost to a team very similar to this at NAIC, but that was 68 days, a trip to Finland, and a lot of practice ago. Since losing at NAIC, I've spent extra care understanding how these Specs Terapagos teams work, and I have a lot of experience against them. It's a scary matchup, but it is familiar. I know what I have to do. Game 1, my opponent opens with Tornadus and Chi-Yu against my Incineroar and Calyrex Shadow. They want to soften my Pokemon up early with Chi-Yu so they can go into Terapagos later in order to finish me off. So I hit the gas, and Haunts fires off its first Astro Barrage of many this weekend, protected by Fake Out. Even with Chi-Yu's Dark typing, you have to respect this damage, so I'm able to waste a few turns of their Tailwind before KOing Tornadus, getting some good damage on Chi-Yu in the process, and I give my Calyrex a special attack boost. Specs Terapagos comes in. I talked up Specs as being terrifying for its damage output, and don't get me wrong, it is scary. But it has one major weakness. Specs Terapagos cannot protect. That means it's time for the Fake Out Blender. Incineroar and Rillaboom are able to protect my partner Pokemon, and with my huge early game lead, I am able to close out the game without trouble. I win game 1. But winning one game isn't enough. Every round is best 2 out of 3. I need to win another one if this world is going to finally start well. Game 2, I stick with my game plan. Incineroar and Calyrex Shadow with Rillaboom and Urshifu in the back. But my opponent, having realized that Chi-Yu wasn't able to get much done, switches their leads to Tornadus and Urshifu. Last time, I just went on the offense, using Fake Out and Astro Barrage to get a lead before the threat in the field could get much done. This time, the threat in the field is Urshifu. So, up a game, I make a read. They're going to protect Urshifu. It's time for the Fake Out Blender. I switch Incineroar out to Rillaboom, and Urshifu protects. Tornadus sets up Tailwind, but instead of launching an Astro Barrage, I've got something more diabolical in mind. Literally, my horse is plotting. No Pokemon has taken a single point of damage, but I've tilted the board state way in my favor. They stay in with both Pokemon, and Fake Out stops Urshifu from moving, while Astro Barrage picks up a double KO. Calyrex gets 2 special attack boosts as my opponent is forced into their final 2 Pokemon, Chi-Yu and Terapagos. With all 4 of my Pokemon still alive, Calyrex at +4, and both Fake Out users still around, I'm already functionally past the finish line. I win game 2, putting me at a record of 1 win and 0 losses. First hurdle cleared. I find a spot to meet up with my friends after the round, and for the first time that I can remember, every single one of us won round 1. Marcus, Aaron, Brendan, Yuki, Dr. Aaron, Billa, myself, everyone won. There is still a lot of Pokemon left to be played, but nonetheless, it feels like a good way to start the day. Round 2 goes up, and I'm paired against a player from Japan. That Terapagos team might have been pretty familiar, but this team is extremely familiar. Mostly. It's a Miraidon team featuring 5 of the same 6 Pokemon that Dr. Aaron Trailer is using, which isn't that surprising given that the team was originally built by an incredibly strong Japanese player named Arubega, and is one of the main teams to beat going into Worlds. Miraidon is a matchup I am extremely comfortable in because a lot of my time in Finland was spent sparring against Dr. Aaron, who I believe is one of the best Miraidon players in the world. Of all the restricted Pokemon matchups, this is the one that I feel I understand the best. But there's one little issue. You might think I'm talking about the one different Pokemon, Iron Treads, a Pokemon that I've literally never played against before in any format. Truthfully though, it isn't what has me worried. This team has Iron Hands, Whimsicott, Miraidon, and Farigiraf, all mostly with the sets that I'm used to playing against. And it also has Urshifu, a Pokemon that both Aaron and Arubega had as well. But Aaron, like most players, is using the water type Urshifu Rapid Strike with a Focus Sash. And here, I'm staring down the barrel of a choice banded dark type Urshifu Single Strike. So this is a Pokemon that can't be stopped with Protect or slowed down with Intimidate, with an offensive Terra type and an item that further boosts its damage by 50%, that hits half of my team for super effective damage and always lands a critical hit with its signature move. On past teams, I can handle Dark Urshifu with Terra Fairy Farigiraf, using Trick Room to take away the speed advantage, but I'm Grass Terra now, so I need to find another way through. You may think, hey, it's another choice item, just use Fake Out like you did to stop Terapagos. And normally, yeah, that is how I would try to handle a Pokemon like this. But there's another problem. My opponent, Farigiraf, who not only stops Fake Out, but also gives my Calyrex problems. I would know because that is the reason I have Farigiraf on my team. But I have one answer locked and loaded. My Terra Fairy Raging Bolt can resist both Wicked Blow and Close Combat, and deal huge damage back. If I'm gonna win this game, it has to be with Bolt. Game 1 begins and gets off to an explosive start, and I end up with Raging Bolt in front of Urshifu. And this turn, there's no safe plays, and whoever guesses right will win. Urshifu can KO a Pokemon, and if it does, I'll lose. I need to call whether Urshifu is going to go for Wicked Blow to KO Rillaboom, Close Combat to KO an Incineroar switch, predict me to Terastallize Bolt and hit it with a Helping Hand Poison Jab, or predict me not to Terastallize Bolt and go for Helping Hand Wicked Blow for the KO. But I think that last option is the least likely. So I can save my Terra, but if they go after Bolt and it's not already a Fairy type, I'll be in huge trouble. I ran out of time in Finland to practice my predictions, and yet here I am, forced to guess. I think they're going to Helping Hand Wicked Blow Rillaboom. I move to switch Incineroar in and not Terastallize Raging Bolt, and right as I go to lock it in, the game crashes. This is really frustrating. Not getting to finish any game sucks, and especially one at the World Championships when the pressure's already so high, it doesn't feel good. A judge comes over, hears what happened, and rules the game as null. I recenter myself and get ready to start game 1 for the second time. This time, my opponent leads with Miraidon and Whimsicott as opposed to Whimsicott and Urshifu. When a game is ruled null, there's no expectation that you need to bring the same Pokemon again, since it would be impossible to enforce. I stick with my lead of Calyrex Shadow and Raging Bolt. Somehow, after a few turns, we end up in the same position again. The game will be decided by this Urshifu against Raging Bolt interaction. I never saw how my read played out last time. Do I trust what I'd committed to already? Or should I take this as an opportunity to do something different? I stick to my read. They're gonna Helping Hand Wicked Blow the Rillaboom. And I get it right. they ignore Bolt and attack Rillaboom, and I switch to Incineroar and get away with greeting my Terra, confirming that they didn't predict it and punish it with Helping Hand Poison Jab. Next turn, they all in on Helping Hand, Terra Dark Wicked Blow into Raging Bolt, but this time I do Terra Teferi and finish off Urshifu. With the Pokemon advantage and Urshifu dealt with, I win game 1. Game 2, my opponent sticks with the same Pokemon, Whimsicott and Miraidon with Farigiraf and Urshifu in the back. I take out Whimsicott early, putting me in the lead, and this time, Farigiraf comes out, not Urshifu. To my surprise, Miraidon KOs my Calyrex with Draco Meteor. I definitely thought I was going to survive that. In doing so though, Miraidon gets stuck on the field without an easy way to switch. I KO the partners while ignoring it, and eventually end up in an endgame with Incineroar and Rillaboom against a -6 Miraidon. My Pokemon are damaged, but I have enough health left that I can finish off the bike. I win game 2 and the set, putting me at a record of 2 wins and 0 losses in the tournament. But I haven't seen the last of Miraidon. Round 3 goes up, and I'm paired against a friend of mine, Francesco Pardini. It is good to see him, but I wish that we weren't playing. As we sit down and I see what I'm up against, it's once again 5 of the same Pokemon from the Arubega team, though this one has thankfully dropped Urshifu. Granted, it has been swapped out with another very scary Pokemon for me, Terra Normal Goldango, but at least this one can't hit through Protect. But Francesco doesn't bring Goldango in either game. In game 1, he goes with Whimsicott, Miraidon, Ogerpon, and Farigiraf. And in game 2, he switches to a Miraidon and Farigiraf lead with Iron Hands and Whimsicott in the back. The thing is, without any weird Pokemon, this is the team that I have the most experience against. I know what the best move is against nearly all of the leads. I know where it's important to get damage. I know which of my Pokemon I need to preserve. With my wealth of experience to draw from, my team flows together smoothly, and I'm able to win both games very cleanly without taking many risks. 3 wins, 0 losses. The last few years, Worlds hasn't gone very well for me. But what you have to understand is that going in, I thought I had a chance to win every single time. It's really only with the benefit of hindsight that I can say that things were really never going to go my way. So this year, even though I felt really good about my team going in, there was still that nagging voice in the back of my head reminding me that feeling good has led me astray before. There is still a lot of tournament left to play, but I couldn't ask for a better start. But the next round may put an end to my winning streak. Last round, I was in familiar territory. Familiar restricted Pokemon, familiar team, familiar player. This next round is the opposite. I'm paired against another Italian player, but one that I don't recognize. And they're using the restricted Pokemon I am the most worried about, Zamazenta. Zamazenta is really scary for a number of reasons. First, it is incredibly physically bulky, thanks to its ability giving it a defense boost, meaning Psyshock from Calyrex is not going to be doing very much damage. Second, it uses the move Wide Guard, which completely blocks Astro Barrage from hitting its side of the field. Third, it has the move Body Press, which is a physical attack that uses the defense stat in order to do damage, meaning I can't intimidate it. And Zamazenta is so strong that Body Press will do over half health to every Pokemon on my team, besides Calyrex, who's naturally immune to fighting moves. Of course, that leads us to reason number 4. Zamazenta is always paired with partners that are extremely threatening to Calyrex before it terastallizes. For example, Chen Pao, a Dark-type Pokemon with priority moves that can KO Calyrex before it attacks, that also strengthens all physical attacks with its ability, and Fluttermane, who uses the Speed Booster energy as well as Shadow Ball to also threaten a KO on Calyrex before it can move. My opponent, of course, has both of these Pokemon. Calyrex can terastallize to get away from these one-shots, and for the more standard Terra Fairy Calyrex, this would give resistances to Body Press, Throat Chop, and Sucker Punch, but I'm a water type. So terastallizing is exactly what my opponent wants, because Zamazenta will suddenly be able to do massive, unintimidatable damage with Body Press. Look, you can tell from the way that I'm talking about this that I am very familiar with Zamazenta. In fact, Aaron Zhang spent a lot of his time in Finland playing this big shield dog. But he used a more offensive approach, and my opponent's is more balanced, with Rillaboom for support and Entei as a fake-out immune Pokemon that also can't be intimidated. But my opponent's final Pokemon is a wild card, and one that's absolutely terrifying. Choice Scarf Ditto. Ditto's imposter ability allows it to transform into whatever Pokemon is across from it when it's sent out. And when Ditto transforms into a Pokemon, it copies all of their stat boosts. So if I take any KOs with Calyrex, Ditto can come in and turn into my restricted Pokemon with all of my boosts. And with the Choice Scarf, it will always be faster. If my Haunts gets going too fast, too quick, My opponent can trample me with my own horse. So what's the counter? Well, Ditto can only copy the Pokemon that's directly across from it. With smart positioning, I can force it to turn into another Pokemon entirely. That being said, this is going to be really difficult. Calyrex can be strong here, but it really relies on getting rid of its counters. So in game 1, I'm going to focus on using Raging Bolt as my early attacker, and I'll try and clean up later with Calyrex. My opponent goes with Chien-Pao, Zamazenta, Entei, and Ditto, and I'm able to use Raging Bolt and Urshifu to get through the early game, getting rid of Chien-Pao. Raging Bolt's massive investment in defense saves me here, as it manages to survive both a body press from Zamazenta and a Terra Normal Extreme Speed from Choice Band Entei. By the time Calyrex comes in, Bolt has done enough damage, and I'm able to force Ditto into the wrong slot so it can't copy Calyrex, winning me the game. Game 2, we both change our leads. I go with Incineroar and Urshifu as they exchange one Calyrex threat for another, switching Chien-Pao for Fluttermane. I use my Urshifu to KO Fluttermane, and then sacrifice it to get better positioning. Now we're tied at 3 Pokemon apiece, with my Calyrex Shadow and Raging Bolt against their Zamazenta and Chien-Pao. Here, Calyrex Shadow is in a lot of trouble. If I attack, I'll feint to Sucker Punch before I can move, and they can also shut down any move I make with Wide Guard, leaving me stuck Psy-Shocking Zamazenta for no damage. But the thing is, Sucker Punch only works if I go for an attack, and neither of my attacking moves are very good here. So from my opponent's perspective, Sucker Punch is probably going to fail. My Calyrex doesn't already have any boosts, so it's not even going to do more than like 40% to either Pokemon with Astral Barrage. So Wide Guard is also probably going to be a wasted move most of the time. If I switch or I protect or I even Nasty Plot, both Wide Guard and Sucker Punch do nothing. I'm up a game and it's a hard matchup. So knowing this, weighing all of the options, I decide to make an extremely risky play. I go for Thunderclap and Astral Barrage into Chien-Pao, understanding that either Sucker Punch or Wide Guard means I lose the game on the spot. My read is dead right. I KO Chien-Pao and Ditto is forced in, on the wrong side, copying Raging Bolt. But Ditto doesn't copy the boost from my booster energy. With just a Choice Scarf Raging Bolt and a damaged Zamazenta, my opponent cannot pull back the game. I win the set, 4 wins and 0 losses in the tournament. The day is halfway over, but again, every win matters. 9 wins is what I'm chasing. 9 wins to make it into Top Cut. It's way too soon to relax. Round 5 goes up and I'm paired against a player from Japan. And oh my god, it's another Zamazenta! This team though differs dramatically from my prior round. Rather than being built around a more balanced style, this version leans more into offense. It has Tornadus for speed control and Choice Specs Chi-Yu for burst damage, as well as Life Orb Raging Bolt for another offensive threat. Both these Pokemon can be powered up by Sunny Day on Tornadus, boosting Chi-Yu's fire moves and activating Raging Bolt's photosynthesis. Tornadus also has Rain Dance to boost their Urshifu's damage and protect their Rillaboom from fire-type damage. But here's the thing. This is really similar to the type of Zamazenta team that Aaron Zhang spent most of his time in Finland using. I am back on solid ground here. I have a very developed game plan, and I know the weaknesses of this team well. It didn't really hit me until now, but by not all using the same team and instead each of us following our own instincts, we not only ended up with teams that better fit our own personal styles, but also sharpened each other's skills by playing different matchups at the highest level. There is no way I would feel nearly as prepared for this opponent if Aaron hadn't beaten the brakes off me repeatedly across the ocean. I go in feeling confident, knowing just what I need to aim to do if I want to win. And things do not go to plan, but in a good way. Well, good for me, not you, Olivia. The round begins and the round ends. I didn't end up needing to use most of what I learned from Aaron because for whatever reason, my Pokemon decided that critical hits are fun and they should get them as often as possible. In both games, I started off strong with good consistent play, but ended up gaining huge leads from critical hits that were just too much for my opponent to recover from. Raging Bolt landed 3 crits in 1 game, as if it wasn't already doing enough damage. This was already a matchup I was probably favored in, and the start of the battle favored me. Getting great luck on top of all of it ended up being the nail in the Cofagrigus, making it unrecoverable for my opponent. 5 wins and 0 losses at the Pokemon World Championships. Just 1 more win gets me past the first day of competition, something I failed to do for the last few years. Of course, even though I am close, I'm not there yet. it's entirely possible that I lose the next 3 rounds in a row. In fact, in 2018, I went 5 wins, 0 losses to 5 wins, 3 losses. And unfortunately, my next match is gonna be tough. See, I attended 3 regional championships this year, and I did really, really well. My final placements were first, and second, meaning only 1 player managed to eliminate me from any regional this season. Of course, the 1 player I lost to in the finals of regionals is the same player I'm playing against right now, with day 2 worlds on the line, Riley. And to add to the pressure, we're going to be playing on the side TV. A huge thank you, by the way, to my friend WolfeyVGC for recording this match and many others while at Worlds. They would otherwise be lost to time. We have still recreated this match, mostly just to make it prettier to look at, but if it suddenly cuts to this footage to show like a crit or something, that's why. Riley is using Miraidon, but his team varies pretty meaningfully from the more standard Arubega version. He has Terra Ghost Miraidon rather than the more standard Terra Fairy. His Urshifu is Mystic Water as opposed to Focus Sash, and his Whimsicott is Focus Sash instead of the more standard Covert Cloak. These small changes can have a big impact, but the bigger adjustment that I'll need to make has to do with his remaining 3 Pokemon. Incineroar isn't often used on these teams anymore, but I at least know how to play against it generally. That's not the case for Iron Crown, though to be honest, I'm not so sure it's going to come here. The real issue though is Ursaluna, Riley's final Pokemon. This is starting to become a trend on day 1. Every team has 1 Pokemon fully dedicated to making Calyrex Shadow sweat. In this case, Ursaluna's normal typing makes it immune to Astral Barrage, while its huge physical defense lets it shrug off Psyshocks. This is going to be tough. I'm probably going to have to take risks with Calyrex and find turns where I can sneak some damage in, but I also have to maintain control of the terrain, and I have to focus on playing the long game so I can close it out when everything else is chipped down. Oh god, okay, let's give it a shot. The battle starts with my Calyrex and Rillaboom against Riley's Miraidon and Incineroar. Now, I could go for something like Fake Out and Terra Water Nasty Plot with Calyrex, but that would make me weak to electric moves, and it would also end up using my Terra right away. So I decided to play it safe, going for Protect with Calyrex and blocking Miraidon's Volt Switch, as my Rillaboom uses U-Turn against Miraidon. Now, this damage might not look very impressive, but this little chip is really important in this matchup. It allows a +2 Astral Barrage to KO Miraidon down the line. I bring out my Incineroar as my opponent uses U-Turn and brings out Ursaluna. Uh-oh, the bear is out. Now, I could go for something like Fake Out and Nasty Plot, but my Calyrex being boosted doesn't really help against Ursaluna and Assault Vest Incineroar. So instead, I just used Astral Barrage to put Miraidon into range of 1 more Astral Barrage. Miraidon Volt Switch crits Calyrex, but I survive, and Incineroar comes back out. This turn was overall in my favor, but I haven't dealt with the actual threat, the Ursaluna, that is still in the field unscathed. However, I did glean some hidden information thanks to the grassy terrain that my Rillaboom set up. Grassy terrain heals Pokemon in order based on their speed, and knowing this, I can tell that my Incineroar is faster than his Ursaluna. Calyrex is in so much danger, and to compensate for this, it also isn't really threatening very much. Riley's got me in a tricky situation, and that makes me feel like it's the perfect time to take a risk. I do not want to Terrastallize Incineroar. I might need my Terra for another Pokemon later, but that means I'm leaving Incin open to going down to a Fake Out and Headlong Rush combo. So the dynamics here are that Incineroar is in danger of going down to a double up, I'm threatening Terra Ghost to get around this, and Calyrex could be knocked out by either Pokemon while also not really threatening much in return. Knowing this, I make a read. I don't think Riley's going to waste an attack on Calyrex, who could obviously just protect and nullify it. I decide to attack, ensuring I get at least some damage down this turn. The turn starts and there's no Fake Out. The threat of Ghost Terra, or maybe Farigiraf switching in, keeps my Incineroar safe. Psyshock does more to Ursaluna than I expected, and their Incineroar U-turns into Whimsicott, revealing their final Pokemon. I parting shot Ursaluna before it attacks, and I'm able to bring out Rillaboom. This is an advantage of having the slower Incineroar. If I'd parting shotted before they U-turned, they could bring Miraidon out second and get terrain control. But here, they were forced to switch before I was. And Rillaboom is the perfect Pokemon to bring out because their Ursaluna goes for Headlong Rush, lowering both of its defenses and doing very little to my Rillaboom. Thanks to my aggressive play, I'm back in the driver's seat. Calyrex is still alive, and more importantly, Ursaluna has taken shots from every direction. It's lost health, it's lost attacking power, it's lowered its own defenses, and fake out pressure is threatening to stop it from moving. Riley and I both know that that bear is the key to his victory. So Riley makes a defensive play, protecting Whimsicott and bringing in Incineroar. This is super safe against the obvious Psyshock play, but I go on the offensive, using Astro Barrage and Woodhammer both into that slot, and bringing Incineroar down to about 60%. It's not a ton of damage, but it's hard for me to break this Assault Vest Incineroar, so every bit counts. At this point, Calyrex has gotten away with robbery being on the field for this long, and I know Riley feels building pressure to get rid of it the lower his Pokemon gets. It might not have been that threatening when Incineroar, Miraidon, and Ursaluna were all at full HP, but now, if it starts taking KOs, it's going to get out of hand really fast. Knowing this, I want to save it. I switch Calyrex out to Incineroar, and good thing too, since Riley tried to KO it with Tailwind and Flare Blitz. This is important. With Tailwind up, my job is now to waste as many of Riley's turns as possible. Incineroar tanks to hit very well, and Rillaboom uses U-turn, bringing out my final Pokemon, Raging Bolt. I fake out Whimsicott, predicting it to not Terra, and punishing the lack of Covert Cloak. And Knockoff does almost nothing to Bolt, as Dragon Pulse drops Incineroar to low yellow HP. That chip damage from earlier definitely added up, as Incineroar is now in danger of going down to one more attack from Bolt. This was a great turn, as I not only broke Whimsicott's Sash and took very little damage, but I've also wasted a Tailwind turn. Now it's finally time to Terrastalize. Bolt turns into a Fairy to ensure that I don't take too much damage from Moonblast, as my opponent's Incineroar U-turns and brings out Ursaluna. It survives the Dragon Pulse, but only barely thanks to the Psyshock chip, and I parting shot Whimsicott to bring Calyrex back out. If I'd brought out Rillaboom, Ursaluna would have been healed from the grassy terrain, but because there is no terrain, it faints to the burn, putting me in the Pokemon lead. Miraidon hits the field. Whimsicott switches to Incineroar, and Raging Bolt switches to Rillaboom. I protect Calyrex and block the Volt switch, and Tailwind finally ends, putting me back in control of the matchup. I don't bother with Fake Out and just launch Astro Barrage, but to my shock, it doesn't KO the Miraidon. It's okay though, I've covered for this. Calyrex goes down to Volt Switch and Whimsicott comes back out, but Rillaboom U-turn finishes off Incineroar. And now, with low HP Miraidon forced back in against my Rillaboom in terrain, there's no way to stop Grassy Glide. I KO Miraidon and win Game 1. Game 2, I decided to try a different approach. Incineroar and Ursaluna were really hard for me to break, but they share a weakness: to water. So game 2, I lead off with Rillaboom and Urshifu against my opponents Miraidon and Incineroar. Incineroar switches to Whimsicott as I detect with Urshifu to scout for Miraidon's move, blocking a Volt Switch, and Rillaboom U-turn gets me that all-important chip while also bringing in Calyrex. Now, my Urshifu could go down to a Moonblast and Volt Switch double up, and I could also get stuck on the field using Detect if Whimsicott goes for Encore. But doing so would mean ignoring my Calyrex with one or both Pokemon, and attacking into Urshifu when it switches to Rillaboom would be disastrous. So I take a risk, and I leave my Urshifu completely vulnerable. And Whimsicott switches out. Astro Barrage brings Miraidon below half, and Volt Switch doesn't crit this time, so it doesn't even do half to my Calyrex. Whimsicott comes back in, but loses half of its health to Surging Strikes. My play was risky, but it paid off in a big way. And now my position is incredible. Ursaluna not only can't block Urshifu with Protect, but with Whimsicott on the field, it also can't switch out. Nothing else on Riley's team wants to take a close combat. There's only one thing that I need to be scared of now: Ursaluna inside Tailwind. Well, in a vacuum, that's the thing that I need to be afraid of, but I'm not, because I know that this Ursaluna is very slow, likely minimum speed. Remember in game 1 when I saw that the Ursaluna was slower than my Incineroar? That means I know that it has to be slower than 58 speed stat, meaning even if they Tailwind, my Urshifu will still be faster. It's actually possible for max speed Ursaluna to outspeed my Calyrex in Tailwind, so this is really important to know, and it's all thanks to my Incineroar being as slow as possible. With Whimsicott's Focus Sash gone, I'm threatening a KO with Astro Barrage, and every turn that my opponent has to play defensive, I get more and more recovery from grassy terrain. The lead is definitely in my favor. Riley makes an incredible defensive play, switching Whimsicott out to Incineroar and terrestrializing Ursaluna to normal. My Astro Barrage does nothing, and close combat can't even do half to Ursaluna, as Facade drops me down to Focus Sash. If I'm gonna lose this game, this is how it begins. And the next turn, Riley makes another great play. I protect both my Pokemon to block Fake Out, but he doesn't go for it, and instead switches in Whimsicott completely unpunished. Now, both my Pokemon could be encored, getting stuck doing nothing, but I see a way out. My Urshifu might be in the red HP, but red HP isn't no HP. I can still attack. It's counterintuitive to terastallize a Pokemon this low, but I need just a little bit of extra damage. Whimsicott Encore's Calyrex, wasting its turn, but thanks to Terra Stellar, Urshifu is now just that little bit stronger, and Terra Stellar's Surging Strikes just barely KOs Ursaluna before it can attack, putting me in the lead 4 against 3. Miraidon comes out. At this point, I have to pivot out my Encored Calyrex, so I switch both my Pokemon out into Incineroar and Rillaboom, shrugging off the Dragon Pulse and Moonblast. Next turn, Incineroar goes down to a double up, but that's okay. I'm playing a positioning game here. I U-turn and go right back into Calyrex and Urshifu, swapping one duo of Pokemon for another. But this time, Urshifu is a bait. I switch it right out into Rillaboom and my opponent falls for the trap, not bringing in Incineroar, but instead setting Tailwind up and using Dragon Pulse. Astral Barrage KOs both. And now up 3 Pokemon against just Incineroar, I win the game and the set, putting me at a record of 6 wins and 0 losses. Wait, I did it. I made it out of day 1. After years of stumbling, working so hard and not having anything to show for it, I'm still here. No, I'm more than still here. I'm going full steam. I could win this tournament. I feel like I'm playing great. I've won every single match. Hold on. Have I even dropped a game yet? Oh my God, I'm undefeated. Okay, thinking about this is not going to help me. That last set, the games were long. There's not a lot of time before my next match. I need to recenter. Round 7 goes up, and I'm against a player from Japan. And for the first time all day, it's the mirror match. Calyrex Shadow versus Calyrex Shadow. In fact, we each have 5 of the same 6 Pokemon. The only difference in our Pokemon is my Farigiraf against their Amoonguss. Of course, there are other differences within the Pokemon themselves. They have Terra Normal Calyrex, their Raging Bolt is Life Orb, and their Incineroar has Covert Cloak and Taunt as opposed to Safety Goggles and Helping Hand. But I built my team to win the mirror match. In game 1, they lead off with Calyrex and Raging Bolt against my Incineroar and Calyrex, and I execute my game plan. Bait out the Terastallization, bring in Urshifu, and use Farigiraf to protect it. I handle the Calyrex with Urshifu and then clean up with Farigiraf. But it ended up being a little close for comfort with their Raging Bolt and Urshifu in the back doing so much damage even after I dealt with the Calyrex. And that gets me thinking. Game 1, they brought Calyrex, Raging Bolt, Amoonguss, and Urshifu. And my intuition is they're going to do the same Pokemon again game 2. And I noticed something about these 4 Pokemon. They're kind of weak to grass types. This is where Farigiraf's Terra type comes into play, even though it's not the reason I put it on the team in the first place. Grass Terra instead of Fairy was a big trade-off, and I intended for it to help more with Sleep Powder, but what is Spore if not Sleep Powder's ambition? So, game 2, my plan is different. I'm going to treat Farigiraf as if it's my restricted Pokemon, using Terra Grass on it to make it immune to Amoonguss, and to give it resistances to Thunderbolt and Surging Strikes. And my plan works perfectly. Farigiraf ends up in just the right place at just the right time, blocks a Spore with the Terra, and wears down my opponent's team with Hyper Voice and Psychic, letting me clean up with Urshifu. I win the set. 7 wins and 0 losses. 1 round left today, and it matters. I may have already guaranteed my spot in day 2, but I still need 9 wins total to make top cut. If I can win here, it'll mean I just need to win 1 of my 3 games tomorrow. Unfortunately, my last round is against another top player from Japan, and just like me, they're undefeated. It's also a matchup I lost to at NAIC. Calm Mind Terapagos with tons of support. With Rillaboom's grassy terrain and leftovers, Terapagos is able to heal tons of health, and with Incineroar's Intimidate, double Fake Out support, Calm Mind making it bulkier, and Ogerpon providing redirection, it's really tough to get rid of the turtle. But I've got a spreadsheet for this. I know exactly what I need to do to win. The battle starts with my Incineroar and Calyrex against their Incineroar and Terapagos. I know my opponent wants just one thing: Calm Mind. And since my Incineroar is as slow as possible, they know they have the faster Fake Out. My Calyrex isn't threatening anything obvious. Surely they can just fake out my Incineroar and go for a Calm Mind. What's the worst thing that happens? I Terra Water Calyrex just in case they go for knockoff and switch Incineroar to Urshifu as they Fake Out and Calm Mind. My Psyshock does, okay, pitiful damage, but that doesn't matter. It's broken Terra Shell, Terapagos' ability that makes all moves not very effective, but only while it's at full HP. Now they have a vulnerable turtle, Incineroar is already on the field, and they have no way of protecting themselves thanks to the brokenness of Unseen Fist. They switch Incineroar out and Terastallize to Stellar, hoping the HP they get from transforming will keep them safe. But another Psyshock plus Close Combat KOs Terapagos before it can move. And that's that. My opponent forfeits on the 3rd turn. I knew from before the match started that this exact combo of moves was pretty much impossible for Terapagos to survive, and with the team fully built around supporting the turtle, my opponent has no chance now that it's gone. I win game 1. Game 2 is closer. My opponent's more careful with their Terapagos, and I'm not able to get rid of it right away. But I play greedy with my Terra, and it pays off, as I'm eventually able to get rid of Terapagos, after which point the dominoes fall quickly. I win game 2, the set, and finish the day with a record of 8 wins and 0 losses. But beyond not losing a set, I did not lose a single game. My final record is 16 wins and 0 losses total. This has never in the history of the game been done before. No player has ever gone undefeated in games on the first day of Worlds, and it feels amazing because I faced multiple matchups today that were really tough. From Zamazenta to Urshifu Dark with Farigiraf to Calm Mind to Terapagos, I came prepared to play against a stable of horses. Instead, I only fought one Calyrex while I had to deal with Dittos and Ursalunas all the way. I feel like every one of my opponents had at least one dedicated Calyrex Shadow answer, and they've been familiar with the idea of my team, but it still wasn't enough. When the usage stats for day 1 drop, I glance at the graphic, and I see a very familiar set of Pokemon at the top. That's right. I've ended up bringing all 6 of the most used Pokemon to the tournament. However, I am the only player at the tournament, other than Marcus, using this exact combo of 6. Now, maybe this seems like I'm playing the easy way to you, but to me, this means 2 things. First, I did a good job choosing these Pokemon. They're performing well for a reason. And second, everyone is ready for them. I do think my team is unique for sure, but over the course of the tournament, players are going to see some version of every Pokemon on this team multiple times. The details of mine are a bit different, but they have the general idea of what to expect. And that is exactly how I wanted the tournament to go. My philosophy this Worlds was simple. I will win not because my team gives me an advantage, but because I am the best player in the world. So far, it's working. I have the strongest Pokemon at my disposal. I just have to figure out how to use them to win. It's finally starting to sink in. This is different from the past few years. No matter what happens tomorrow, this is a run I can be proud of. With the day finally over, I meet up with my friends. Unfortunately, only Dr. Aaron Trailer made it through. Aaron Zeng, Brendan, Yuki, and Billa all ended up just 1 win short. And the team didn't end up clicking for Marcus in the end, as he had to play even harder matchups than I did. We meet up for dinner, congratulating and commiserating hand in hand, and head to bed early. Everything will be decided tomorrow, and I would like to finally get some decent sleep.
Yeah, let's see how you do under pressure. Oh, yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me, brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better.
I finally slept well, but it seems that there was a cost. I spent yesterday focused entirely on being in the moment. I felt this wonderful sense of peace that kept the pressure at bay. That feeling is gone, and all the usual tournament nerves are back as if they never left. That being said, I do have a slight buffer against the nerves thanks to my performance yesterday. There are 3 rounds today before we enter the elimination bracket, and if I can win a single one, I'll make it in. I head to the venue with Aaron as we get ready for what could very well be our final day in the tournament. At the end of today, only the 2 players in the finals will still be in contention to win the whole thing. Before long, the pairings go up, and my heart jumps into my stomach. I'm paired against a player who, just like me, did not lose a single set yesterday. But that fact is less frightening than the player himself, Hirofumi Kimura from Japan. Hirofumi is not only the runner-up at the World Championships from 2019, he not only made it to the final bracket at Worlds last year, but he is also the 2-time Japanese national champion. Japan is a region with some of the strongest players in the world. It's part of why there have been more Japanese world champions than any other region. And Hirofumi is one of the best. And the matchup is not in my favor. Hirofumi is using Calyrex Ice as his restricted Pokemon. Now, I have a Terra Water Calyrex Shadow in part for this exact matchup, but in this matchup, the Ice Rider isn't even the scary part. Unlike most Ice Rider players who focus on supporting that Pokemon's overwhelming power, Hirofumi's filled out the rest of his team with offensive threats. I've never played against a team like this. And the pressure is on, as we'll be playing on stream. I always feel pressure before the first round of the day, and playing against one of the best in front of the whole world certainly doesn't help. I realize there's no safe way to get through this. So so I'm gonna take a gamble. I can't explain why, but I think he's gonna lead with Chi-Yu and Flutter Mane. I'm gonna counter it. The best way I know how is Rillaboom and Urshifu. Rillaboom can KO Flutter Mane and Urshifu can KO Chi-Yu. Of course, there are stronger leads that I could use if I knew for sure that he's going to lead with Flutter Mane and Chi-Yu, but Rillaboom and Urshifu don't immediately lose me the game if I'm wrong and Hirofumi goes with a different approach. The game begins with my Rillaboom and Urshifu against his Chi-Yu and Flutter Mane. I want this Flutter Mane gone as soon as possible, since it's one of the biggest threats to my team. Urshifu is here not as an actual threat that I intend to attack with, since both Flutter Mane and Chi-Yu can outspeed it, but instead as a bluff. I want to make sure that this Flutter Mane doesn't protect, and Urshifu is my best way of doing that. If it switches out, it loses the booster energy, and if it attacks, it'll go down to my Rillaboom's Wood Hammer. Of course, in order to keep Rillaboom safe from Chi-Yu, I need to Terrastalize, but Chi-Yu doesn't attack. It instead switches to Urshifu. So my Terrastalization ends up not only wasted, but actually hurting me. Even worse, to my absolute shock, Flutter Mane protects. Hirofumi has perfectly read my bluff, and as my Wood Hammer goes straight into protect while my Urshifu detects, this game has gone from heavily in my favor to massively behind. Both my Pokemon are in danger of going down now. Rillaboom to a Surging Strikes, Urshifu to a double attack. Of course, our Urshifu are likely speed tying. I have the option of gambling if I want, hoping I win the speed tie and trying to take out the Flutter Mane before my bear faints. But Hirofumi is one of the best in the world, and I realize he's not going to leave this match to chance. If he uses Aqua Jet and Moonblast, he can get around the speed tie potential, break my Focus Sash, and KO my Urshifu safely before it can attack. So I make a play that's only possible because I know Hirofumi is one of the best. One that would be incredibly risky if not for the fact that I'm sitting in day 2 with the highest caliber players in the world. I switch in my Calyrex Shadow for my Urshifu, and I leave Rillaboom totally vulnerable. But as I hoped, it's Aqua Jet and Moonblast coming out into Calyrex, leaving it still moderately healthy, and Grassy Glide breaks Urshifu's Focus Sash, dropping it below half HP. It's not amazing to trade half of my restricted Pokemon for half of Urshifu, but given how bad the spot was at the start of the turn, this is definitely an improvement. But I'm still behind, so I need to make another read. I switch Calyrex out to Incineroar. Urshifu uses Aqua Jet into Incineroar as Dazzling Gleam follows up. It was ambiguous whether or not just a single Moonblast would pick up the KO, so Hirofumi added an Aqua Jet just to guarantee the KO if I stayed in. But my risky play pays off. Rather than finishing Urshifu off with a Grassy Glide, I instead leave Rillaboom completely open and launch Wood Hammer into Flutter Mane, knocking it out in one hit. One major threat removed. Chi-Yu's forced back out. I can't fake it out because of the Covert Cloak, but with 2 fire types on the field, it's a lot less threatening. It cost me nothing to Grassy Glide into Urshifu here, so of course, Hirofumi switches Urshifu out into Raging Bolt as Chi-Yu protects, putting Hirofumi back in the driver's seat once more as my Grassy Glide does trivial damage to Bolt and Parting Shot is blocked. Importantly, this means Hirofumi chose to leave his restricted Pokemon behind, recognizing, just like me, that his other Pokemon can be just as threatening. A decision that's currently paying off, as my ways of dealing with this Raging Bolt are becoming more and more limited. Raging Bolt is a hard Pokemon to threaten directly. Thunderclap lets it always threaten Pokemon that are faster than it, especially my electric weak Urshifu. To win this game, I'm going to need to position not just 1, but 2 Pokemon correctly in order to get rid of it. Chi-Yu goes for a Snarl. It doesn't do much, but it's truthfully not really here to do damage. It's here to lower my team's special defense stat just by being on the field. Rillaboom moves next with U-turn, and now I have a choice. Raging Bolt still has to attack. Bringing in Urshifu means I'm risking losing my Focus Sash, but bringing in Calyrex risks losing my restricted Pokemon. Which should I choose? Calyrex is less valuable here. It's going to be hard keeping it safe from Life Orb Thunderclap and from Chi-Yu, and Urshifu is all I have left to deal with this fish. Its Focus Sash lets me potentially get around Raging Bolt's Thunderclap at least for 1 turn. However, I don't think Hirofumi attacked Rillaboom, because Incineroar is the easier target here. So I'm going to risk it and send out Urshifu. Thunderbolt comes out and finishes off Incineroar with a critical hit that I really don't think mattered. The score is now even with 3 Pokemon left apiece, but I can bring my Rillaboom back out, giving me the deadly combination of Unseen Fist and Fake Out, but only for this turn. The obvious play here is to go for Fake Out into Raging Bolt and close combat into the Chi-Yu, forcing either a Terra or a KO on the fish, and putting me in the lead once more. This is the position I need to take out Raging Bolt, and Hirofumi knows it.
The thing is, though, for Wolf, still has that sash intact on the Urshifu, which is, it's been broken now, which is a bit vulnerable. But we are going to see, because of that fake out pressure, it switch out this turn.
The Grassy Glide, that's going to be the hit onto the Urshifu that had just swapped in. And now it's going to be Hirofumi down 2 Pokemon. Heat Wave coming on out. Rillaboom's going to be missed, but hitting into the Urshifu. That's the one I want to keep an eye on because that's the one where now the sash is broken. Firing off a close combat into the Chi-Yu.
Calling out the Raging Bolt switch effectively wins me the game here, as I'm suddenly up 3 against 1, and I no longer have to deal with the stupid Beads of Ruin. Bolt comes out, and I can safely go for Detect and U-turn, sacrificing my Calyrex to reset Fake Out pressure. Hirofumi knows there's no way to stop Fake Out in close combat, taking the KO, and forfeits. I win game 1. I'm just 1 game away from qualifying for the final bracket at Worlds for the first time in 4 years. And that's when both my hands go numb. 1 game away and I can't feel anything past my wrists. Just hitting the next button on the Switch feels out of reach. A less intense version of this has happened to me before, but it's never been anywhere near this bad. I'm at the last step. This cannot be happening right now. Filled with the nerves from the morning, all sense of calm gone, and it hits me. Of course, that's why my hands are numb. It's the pressure. Later, I'll learn that what's happening to me is a response to extreme stress. But in the moment, all I can do is stare at my hands, take a deep breath, and hope that feeling comes back. Slowly, it does. And when the tingles finally subside, I hit the start button on the game that could finally let me clear this next hurdle. No more time to freak out. We're back in the final game. The last battle may have been really close, but I can't forget that the lead started out heavily in my favor. I just lost the advantage right away because Hirofumi made the perfect play. But knowing that he had to make a crazy call out, I don't think there's any chance that he leads Flutter and Chi-Yu again. And I also don't think he'll leave his Ice Rider behind since he just lost game 1 without it. The leads that I expect, given all this, are Raging Bolt Ice Rider or Ogerpon Ice Rider, both leads that really punish my Urshifu Rillaboom lead from game 1. I have a way to counter both. See, unlike most Ice Riders who hold the clear amulet, this one is holding Never Melt Ice, giving its ice moves a damage boost, but crucially letting one of my Pokemon do its job very well. Game 2 starts with Hirofumi's Ice Rider and Raging Bolt against my Calyrex Shadow and Incineroar. And with no clear amulet, my Intimidate sticks, immediately weakening Hirofumi's strongest Pokemon. My most obvious play is to go for Fake Out and Nasty Plot, maybe even terastallizing along the way. But with Chi-Yu lurking in the back, I'm not so sure that I want to set up. Hirofumi cannot afford to protect here, as if I get Nasty Plot up without taking any damage, he'll instantly lose to Helping Hand Astro Barrage. Understanding this, I can punish this offensive play that I forced. Calyrex Ice switches to Chi-Yu, activating the Beads of Ruin, but my Fake Out hits the Raging Bolt, preventing what was likely to be a huge Draco Meteor, and Astro Barrage comes out, skipping the setup turn and using Chi-Yu's Beads of Ruin against it. Now though, my Calyrex is pinned. The combination of Thunderclap and Snarl will KO Calyrex regardless of whether or not I terastallize. Of course, I could go for Protect and Parting Shot to try and keep Calyrex safe, but I don't, because Thunderclap is a priority move. And this game, I've left Rillaboom behind for Farigiraf. I switch it in and terastallize to water, launching an Astro Barrage to finish off the Raging Bolt and dropping Chi-Yu below 50% HP. Thanks to the KO, Grimnay gives Calyrex a boost, and though it would normally lose that boost to Snarl from Chi-Yu, the Covert Cloak keeps my Calyrex safe. This is where the core concept of my team really goes to work. My new water typing means going into Ice Rider would spell complete disaster for Hirofumi, so he's forced into his final Pokemon, Fluttermane. Hirofumi has 2 chances with his Fluttermane to ruin my day. The first, whether his Fluttermane can KO my Shadow Rider with the Beads of Ruin up. The second is lurking in its Terra type, a normal Terra that can keep it safe from Astro Barrage on a crucial turn. Of course, becoming a normal type means you lose your Ghost typing, and I'm going to exploit that. Calyrex is threatening a KO on Fluttermane and maybe even a KO on Chi-Yu, and that means that this is the perfect time to play defensive. I don't need to go for a KO this turn. I can wait and see how Hirofumi wants to react to my pressure. Farigiraf is at -1 special attack and in KO range, so I switch it out into Incineroar. Incineroar is one of the best Pokemon against Chi-Yu and Fluttermane, and I can use the pressure that Calyrex is applying to let it switch in without taking much damage. I protect my Calyrex to keep it safe, and Fluttermane uses the once per game mechanic and turns into a normal type. This turn might look like a dud because Calyrex blocks a Moonblast with Protect, and Chi-Yu blocks nothing with Protect. But even though there wasn't any damage, this turn is a huge leap forward for me. Normally, Fluttermane is immune to Fake Out because it's a Ghost type, and Chi-Yu can block Fake Out with Protect. Right now, neither is true. Chi-Yu attempts the 1 in 3 chance for a double Protect, but it fails. Fake Out stops Fluttermane from moving, and Astral Barrage comes out and barely doesn't KO Chi-Yu. This isn't great, but then again, I didn't take any damage this turn, and I got the Chi-Yu into a range where any attack will knock it out. Calyrex is once again threatening a KO on either Pokemon, but only one at a time. So I decide to once again play it safe, going for Protect and a Parting Shot. But this time, Hirofumi is ready, switching Ice Rider in safely and blocking Parting Shot with Protect, leaving my Incineroar stuck on the field. But I accounted for this, because without Chi-Yu on the field, there's no way that my Calyrex will go down to the Moonblast. It's not even close, which means I can safely use Astral Barrage. But the Ice Rider barely survives. Incineroar moves next. This is minimum speed Ice Rider, and uses Parting Shot into Fluttermane, lowering its special attack. An investment I suspect will be crucial given the Pokemon that I have in the back. Unfortunately, Parting Shot means that I'm forced to bring in a Pokemon who has to take the Ice Rider attack. I choose Urshifu. I need the Aqua Jet pressure. And Glacial Lance comes out, but it doesn't KO my Calyrex. All the bulk I put in is really paying off. Now, literally every Pokemon on the field is in danger of being KO'd. I know I want to use Aqua Jet because it guarantees me a knockout, but the problem is if I lose Urshifu, I might run out of juice. I protect Calyrex, and Aqua Jet knocks out their Calyrex, but Dazzling Gleam comes out. This is a super effective attack from one of the strongest new Pokemon, but that Pokemon's carrying around a parting gift from Incineroar. Urshifu survives. Chi-Yu is forced back out and goes down immediately to Aqua Jet, and I choose to save Calyrex by switching Incineroar out in its stead. Urshifu goes down and I send out Farigiraf. Fake Out guarantees Trick Room, and up 3 against 1 inside of Trick Room, I KO Fluttermane and win the set. With a set record of 9 wins and 0 losses, and a game record of 18 wins and 0 losses, I become the first player to qualify for the final bracket as the final player left undefeated in the tournament. After years of not living up to my expectations, I have finally mustered another good run. I made it all the way back to the final stage of the tournament. No matter what happens in the next 2 rounds, I'll be competing against the best of the best for a chance to call myself the world champion once again. But it is too soon to celebrate. The job isn't done yet. Stream matches always end up taking longer, so there's not much time to rest before the next round. I head to my table and sit down to play. It's a mirror match. My opponent has the more standard version of Calyrex Shadow, the one that I practiced against. We share 5 of the same 6 Pokemon, with them having Ogerpon Hearthflame over my Farigiraf. My opponent is using Terra Normal Spell Tag Calyrex Shadow, the set intended to give you the biggest edge over the mirror. But I have my own plans for the mirror matchup, and it centers on that one different Pokemon between our teams. The battle starts the normal way, with each of us leading Calyrex and Incineroar. I make my normal turn 1 play of switching Calyrex out to my not-so-secret weapon, Farigiraf, baiting the Terra successfully and taking the Astral Barrage. But rather than Fake Out or Knock Off, this Incineroar uses Parting Shot to bring out Urshifu, as I do the same. And here, I make a mistake. My opponent switches their Calyrex back out to Incineroar, taking the close combat and breaking my Focus Sash with Rocky Helmet. They use Surging Strikes into Farigiraf, dropping it below half HP, and I click Hyper Voice. With Farigiraf, you almost always want to use Hyper Voice as your first attack in order to activate the Throat Spray, but the keyword is almost. I allowed myself to autopilot, clicking the familiar move when the right move here was Psychic. I would have dropped Urshifu down to its Focus Sash, allowing me to finish it off next turn with Aqua Jet before it could move. Now, instead, my Farigiraf is boosted, but it can't save itself from going down. This one little mistake snowballs into a loss. With Rocky Helmet breaking my Focus Sash and no way of saving Farigiraf, I've lost too many resources without dealing with their Shadow Rider. I lose game 1, my first game lost of the tournament. But the set isn't over. In game 2, my opponent switches to Incineroar and Raging Bolt lead, but I go on the offensive, not bothering to set up and instead just launching Fake Out and Astral Barrage, applying pressure early. With half of Bolt's health gone, I can switch Incineroar out to Farigiraf and make the same Terra Water Astro Barrage play from last round, knocking it out. And with the chip already on Incineroar and a Pokemon lead, I'm able to win Game 2. Game 3 starts off with each of us using Incineroar and Shadow Rider once more. My opponent plays well, once again making it difficult for me to execute my perfect game plan. But I do have an edge. I focus on Farigiraf as my main threat, and I use my trap card of Terra Grass at the perfect time to survive a Thunderbolt my opponent wasn't ready for. In the end, I have a chance to eliminate their Shadow Rider, who has Terrestrialized to normal that has taken a fake out, with my Urshifu that has been intimidated. Against a Calyrex as bulky as mine, this should be all but guaranteed, but I don't know how bulky my opponent is. What I do know is that they are max speed, and with the spell tag, I would assume that they have at least a little special attack investment. I decide the gamble is worth it. Calyrex barely survives, and now there's no recovering. For the first time all tournament, I lose the set, putting me at a record of 9 wins and 1 loss. At the end of the day, this probably won't impact anything in the long run, but I still don't feel great about losing. And I especially don't feel great about the mistake that I made in the first game. Up until this point, I've been playing lights out Pokemon. Now, making this kind of mistake is a really bad sign that I'm not dialed in. I need to refocus. Unfortunately, with that set going to 3 games and far fewer players remaining in the tournament, the rounds are much shorter. And before I even have time to use the bathroom, the final round of the second phase of the tournament is here. And I'm against Hard Trick Room, a matchup that I am extremely uncomfortable in. The limited practice I have against this type of team is nowhere near enough to feel confident. And even worse, the version my opponent is running is very different than the teams that I've practiced against. This was the one matchup I chose to sacrifice because I ran out of time in my prep. I'm gonna have to figure it out on the fly. I lose both games on the first turn. Without a solid plan going in, I'm forced to make guesses to try and keep myself in the game. And my opponent calls my play out on turn 1 of both games, immediately gaining a lead that I just can't recover from. It is my fastest set of the tournament as I quickly lose, putting me at a final record of 9 wins and 2 losses. Okay, so the bad news is that I just lost 2 rounds in a row. But you know what? That's fine. I probably was playing a little bit too relaxed to begin with, because the good news is, it doesn't affect anything. See, the final phase of the tournament has all players who won at least 9 rounds advance, but that isn't a nice even number. With how things shook out, 24 players got 9 or 10 wins. And that means there's 1 extra round in the top cut. But the top 8 players get to skip this round, going straight to the round of 16, the round where you guarantee yourself at least $5,000. As the final matches trickle in, my friends and I find a quiet corner outside the venue to get some air and run the numbers. As Aaron finished just 1 win short of making top cut, I'm the last one of us still standing. As more and more matches finish in the round, we breathe a sigh of relief. Depending on who wins in the final match going on in the round, I will finish either 5th or 6th in the standings. With 8 players advancing, I'm safe. Pokemon's tiebreaker is based on how well your opponents do. So the general rule is the longer you go without losing, the better your tiebreaker. As the last undefeated player in the tournament, I knew that my tiebreaker would be good. And now I have extra time. I head out of the venue to decompress a bit and screw my head back on before playing my most important matches of the year. Which is why I am completely unprepared for what happens next. I'm 9th? There must be some mistake. We ran all the numbers and the worst case scenario was 6th. How could I possibly be 9th? The online pairings, where I wait to see who I'm playing against, stopped updating this round. So even though it looks like there's still a few matches left and plenty of time to get back, that's not the case. We'd gone outside to get away from the lights and the people and the intensity of it all. My friends and I book it, rushing to make it back in time to figure out what happened. As we run to the far end of the hall, I'm breathing hard. I could try to fix this, but I might need to play now. I look at Marcus and understand. He goes to talk to the judges, and I sit down to try and figure out my matchup, assuming I'm gonna have to play. But there's no time. The match is starting already. There's no break before the games begin. After just a minute, Marcus comes back over. The standings have been finalized already. I have to play. What happened? Well, remember how at the start of the tournament, some players got to skip the first round? Now, some players get to skip the first round of the day if they did well enough during the regular season. It turns out these round 1 buys had a funny little coding quirk to them. Pokemon's tiebreaker is something called resistance, and it's calculated by adding up all the wins your opponent got and comparing that to all the games your opponent played. So if your opponents on average won half of their games, you would have a resistance of 50%. Easy enough to understand, right? It turns out that these round 1 buys behaved a little strangely. Normally, when a player gets a buy, like when there's an odd number of people in the tournament and somebody doesn't have an opponent to play against, the buy is treated like an opponent who didn't play any games. In other words, it doesn't impact your resistance at all because it isn't a real player in the tournament. I personally think that this is a fair way of doing things that makes sense intuitively. These round 1 buys worked a little bit differently. Instead of not influencing resistance at all, they instead count as if you defeated a player who did not lose a single game, an 11 wins, 0 losses player, defeated by you in the first round. As you might imagine, this completely breaks the system in place, and basically all but guarantees that if you earned the round 1 bye, you'll skip the first round of Top Cut. But of course, there's an elephant in the room. Why did I not know this? Why was I caught unprepared? Why was I not aware of this crucial detail in the workings of the tournament? Because there is, to this day, absolutely zero information about it online, at least not from the company, and certainly not from anybody else before Worlds. This crucial mechanic that, at the very best, forces me to play another round when I should be preparing and centering myself, and at worst eliminates me from the tournament, was completely hidden. And in my opinion, that's because the company didn't realize that it existed in the first place. I want to be very clear that this next part is just a guess. But here's my theory. The last time that round buys existed was during Black and White, where at the US National Championships, you could skip a round or two. The buys back then also had this same weird quirk of resistance, though we knew to expect them. And truthfully, I suspect it was because that version of the software was a little bit less sleek than the one that we have now. But crucially, it is the same software. My guess is that whoever coded the system this year realized that there was already existing code that allowed selected players to skip the first round, and just applied it to the World Championships this year, not realizing that it had an unintended secondary effect. A secondary effect that has now launched me into a match that I am wholly unprepared for. My opponent is already at the table, ready to go, as I rush over, and their team seems like it was built specifically to dismantle mine. They have not one, but 2 of the most threatening dark types to my Calyrex, Urshifu Dark and Chi-Yu, as well as Calyrex Ice Rider. They also have Speed Booster Energy Fluttermane, as another way to get around my Shadow Rider. The final 2 Pokemon are problematic all on their own, with Amoonguss threatening to put my team to sleep, and Assault Vest Raging Bolt not only shrugging off my attacks with ease, but also threatening my Calyrex should I ever Terrastallize. Normally, I would take the 5 minutes between sets to figure out some sort of plan, but with all the confusion, there isn't time. I'm going into this match out of breath, confused, and unprepared. This is going to be my hardest match of the tournament thus far. This match was played on the side stream, so if you see footage that looks like this, that's the real match. The nicer looking gameplay is a recreation. The closest thing I've played against to this team was Hirofumi, who had Ice Rider, Fluttermane, Chi-Yu, Urshifu Water, and a Grass type redirector. Hirofumi led off with Fluttermane and Chi-Yu, and I started strong by trying to counter it. Without time to form a proper game plan, I'm gonna try the same here. My opponent starts with Raging Bolt and Ice Rider against my Incineroar and Urshifu, and right away I'm at a disadvantage. Against the Calyrex Ice lead, I want to have my Shadow Rider already on the field, and because Ice Rider is so bulky, neither of my Pokemon can do much to it, whereas it can do so much damage in return. What my opponent led would have matched up terribly against a Calyrex Shadow lead, but my opponent has correctly predicted that I don't want to lead with Shadow Rider against this anti-horse team. Now though, I'm forced to scramble. Raging Bolt is a huge threat here, so I fake it out and go for Surging Strikes onto Calyrex, who fires back with a high horsepower, dropping Incineroar to low HP. I got some good damage on Calyrex, and I didn't lose Urshifu's Focus Sash, and that means if my opponent lets me, I can knock out their Ice Rider. But unfortunately, Calyrex switches to Amoonguss, who takes my Helping Hand Close Combat like it's nothing, and breaks my Focus Sash with its Rocky Helmet. And Raging Bolt KOs Incineroar with Volt Switch, bringing out Dark Urshifu. If I'd chosen to go for the Helping Hand Close Combat into Raging Bolt, I'd be in great shape now. But here, my spot is way worse. I send out Calyrex to replace Incineroar, but my goal is to use it as bait. I need this Urshifu gone so that my Shadow Rider can clean up. I switch Calyrex to Rillaboom, as my Close Combat brings their Urshifu to Sash, but they double target my Rillaboom, first with a Terra Dark Wicked Blow, and second with a Spore to cover a switch. Urshifu switches to Raging Bolt, who takes a Fake Out and Close Combat. as Spore fails into Rillaboom once again. With Urshifu low, Calyrex damage, and their Terra used up, my opponent knows that they can't let my Calyrex come in for free, or they're in danger of the horse stampeding through their team. I detect Urshifu as they Thunderclap and Woodhammer the Raging Bolt, and for the third turn in a row, Spore fails into Rillaboom's slot. Now this turn, I'm pretty sure that they want to go for Rage Powder. At this point, they've got to know that I'm not switching in Calyrex, and Close Combat is threatening a KO. Thunderclap brings Urshifu down to Sash as Close Combat KOs Raging Bolt. U-turn comes out, and I bring in Calyrex, feeling confident it's finally safe, as for the fourth turn in a row, they launch Spore into the Rillaboom slot, finally putting my Calyrex to sleep. But I can still win if I waste enough time for my Calyrex to wake up. The Urshifu comes back in, and I switch mine out to Rillaboom as I Terastallize Calyrex to water to survive the Terra Dark Wicked Blow, barely. Unfortunately, this is the turn the grass ends, so Grassy Glide no longer has priority. I need to reposition. I predict the Protect and switch Rillaboom out to Urshifu, and I get it right as Urshifu detects. And though Calyrex stays asleep, I bait my opponent into KOing Urshifu, resetting both Fake Out and Grassy Terrain. But now I make a mistake. I Fake Out Amoonguss, calling Urshifu to not attack, and I go down to Rocky Helmet. I just miscounted how much it would do, but it didn't matter because my Calyrex sleeps for a third turn. I lose game 1. One more loss and I'm eliminated from the tournament, despite the miracle run that I've been having. Their game 1 lead would have been so bad against Incineroar and Calyrex. So I'm going to take a gamble. There's no way that they lead it again in game 2. Even though it was an awful start for me, I'm going to stick with the lead that I used in game 1. This does two things. It punishes a preemptive switch to something like Chi-Yu and Fluttermane, and it also conditions my opponent into believing that this is the lead that I'll use in game 3 if I can win game 2. After all, if I stuck with it after a loss, why would I possibly change after a win? It pays off. My opponent switches to Fluttermane and Raging Bolt. Not exactly the lead I was planning for, but still a major improvement. I Fake Out the Raging Bolt as Moonblast hits Incineroar. Surging Strikes drops Fluttermane super low. A great turn for me. Now, my opponent so far has done a great job of maximizing Amoonguss to its full annoying potential, forcing me to attack into Rocky Helmet, spamming Spore, and exploiting the fact that my Incineroar doesn't have Flare Blitz. I'm confident that if they have it, it's coming in on this turn, so I cover for it switching in by detecting with Urshifu, as my opponent launches a Moonblast and Electroweb, nearly knocking out my Incineroar, and in exchange, I knock off Raging Bolt's Assault Vest. If Amoonguss was brought to this battle, surely it would have switched in to take the obvious Aqua Jet. Now that I'm pretty sure Amoonguss isn't here, I can attack with more impunity. I Aqua Jet into Fluttermane, as Amoonguss does its jump scare appearance, shrugging off Aqua Jet and breaking my Focus Sash. Meanwhile, Rillaboom comes in for Incineroar, and Electroweb drops Urshifu even further. I am really on the back foot. I detect and U-turn as they Draco Meteor my Rillaboom, and the damage numbers just keep adding up. I am running out of health, but I see one way out, and it's going to involve taking more damage. I pivot my Pokemon out once, then again, taking some hits in the process, but I end up exactly where I want, with Rillaboom and Calyrex against a -3 Raging Bolt and Amoonguss, and Fake Out pressure is active. Finally, I get Nasty Plot up, as Urshifu Dark comes out. We both Terastallize, and Amoonguss just barely survives the Astral Barrage, but thanks to my Terra, Calyrex survives the Wicked Blow, and U-turn KOs Amoonguss. Fluttermane comes out, and I have a choice to make. Should I predict the Sucker Punch and protect? Or is it too obvious? I choose neither, and find a safer play. Despite my Calyrex being boosted, I switch it out into Incineroar, getting an Intimidate off and resetting my Fake Out pressure. And at the same time, I KO their Fluttermane with Aqua Jet. Sucker Punch fails, but if they had chosen to Wicked Blow, I would have been just as safe. I'm up 4 against 2. Raging Bolt comes out, and I prove I don't need Flare Blitz by lending a helping hand to my Urshifu to take out their own bear with Aqua Jet, as Electroweb KOs both. Fake Out and Astral Barrage KO the Raging Bolt, and I win game 2. It's all down to game 3, a battle that begins and could maybe end with the leads. I think they're gonna go back to the game 1 lead. It was so good against Incineroar Urshifu, and I've led that twice. Finally, it's time to switch to the lead that I've wanted to use this whole time: Incineroar and Calyrex. But my guess is wrong. It's not Calyrex in the lead, but that pesky Amoonguss. That being said, I have the advantage. Fake Out into Amoonguss and Nasty Plot is ridiculously safe. There's basically no counterplay. Then I get to thinking, what if I Parting Shot first? If I drop the Raging Bolt special attack, I don't even need to worry about taking big damage from Draco Meteor, and I can bring in Rillaboom to reset my Fake Out pressure. Seems like a no-brainer. But my opponent does something that I never considered. They Volt Switch into Incineroar as I protect with Calyrex. If I'd made the safe play of using Fake Out into Amoonguss and Nasty Plot, I'd have gained an incredible edge. Now I'm vulnerable to the Urshifu that just came out, even as I bring in Rillaboom. I switch Calyrex to Incineroar, hoping to take the Wicked Blow with that slot, but Terra Dark Wicked Blow hits Rillaboom instead, dropping it to low HP. Woodhammer fires back, but I knock out my own Rillaboom with the recoil. I bring Calyrex back in. I need to call whether this Urshifu is going to protect. If I think it will, I can get a Nasty Plot off. My gut says it's going to protect, but if I'm wrong, it's game over on the spot. So I play it safe, going for Fake Out and Astro Barrage, Terastallizing to Water. The wrong play. Amoonguss protects, and Raging Bolt comes in for Urshifu, shrugging off the assault and finding itself suddenly favored according to the type chart. I need to gamble. Helping Hand Psyshock is not a guaranteed KO on Amoonguss, but I know that it is very likely. I'm behind and I'm losing. I need to make a call. I go for it, and it KOs. Electroweb doesn't even do that much damage. I am still in this. But that Urshifu is back on the field, and both my opponent's Pokemon have a priority move, one of which is super effective. But, you know, I have a Pokemon that eats up priority moves. Farigiraf. I haven't revealed my last Pokemon this game. If it is the giraffe in the back, my position is incredible. But if it isn't, I'm in danger. Then again, Thunderclap might not even KO my Calyrex. Does my opponent know that they need to attack with both Sucker Punch and Thunderclap? Are they worried about Farigiraf? Urshifu switches to Chi-Yu, the unrevealed final Pokemon. And thanks to the Beads of Ruin, a Thunderclap on its own is enough to take out Calyrex. My most important Pokemon, gone. I parting shot and bring in my final Pokemon, Urshifu. Farigiraf was not in this battle, but I'm not giving up. This may still be possible if I can get every turn correct. I predict the Raging Bolt to switch and launch both Fake Out and Surging Strikes into Chi-Yu, getting the KO. Raging Bolt hits the field once again. It's 2 against 2. Our Urshifu might be speed tying, and I don't want to gamble my run at Worlds on a 50-50. So I go for Helping Hand Aqua Jet, and it KOs Urshifu. Raging Bolt fires back with an Electroweb, but it does so much more than I expected. This is not over though. Electroweb can still miss. I detect, and Incineroar takes another Electroweb, as Knockoff leaves Raging Bolt with just above half HP. This is the turn. Electroweb comes out and hits Urshifu, knocking it out. Incineroar, my final Pokemon standing, launches one final knockoff, but it isn't enough. With a score in the set of 1 win and 2 losses, I am eliminated from the Pokemon World Championships with a final placement of 17th. Before I talk about anything else, there's something that I'd like to say. Yes, what happened with the buys was unfortunate, but I don't want that to at all take away from my opponent's victory. They played well, they made hard reads, and they won fair and square. I probably wasn't in the best headspace that I've ever been, but that is a reflection of me, not them. I don't think this would have been an issue, but I really don't want to see anybody in the comments saying anything disparaging about them. They won the set fair and square, and I can say that without reservations. I lost. I worked so hard, and I came up short. And the most surprising thing is, I can live with that. I was not the best player in the world this year. I did not deserve to win the World Championships. I tried my best, and it wasn't enough. And at least to me, that's okay. If having to play when I wasn't prepared meant that I couldn't win, then I just need to be better, plain and simple. There will always be factors outside of your control in Pokemon. And while most of them happen in-game, if I want to be the best in the world, then I need to be prepared for the out-of-game ones too. Becoming the world champion, the best player in the entire world, is a fool's errand. However difficult you think that it is, it's harder. I know because I've done it. I know how much has to go right, how little room for error there is, the razor-thin margins between victory and defeat, triumph and heartbreak. But the only way to become the world champion is to be a fool, to believe that you, against all odds, can do it. Do I look silly to you? Standing here at the end, eliminated, close enough to see the crown, unable to grasp it? Maybe I do, but I don't feel silly. What a wonderful thing it is to try, to hope, to dream, even when it ends in failure. If, going into Worlds, I knew that I was supposed to win, what would it mean if I did? What would it be worth? Sure, I'm sure it would still feel good, but the victories you achieve in these tournaments matter because every one of us playing knows that the expected outcome is not glory, but defeat. I didn't win, sure, but it was a hell of a run, wasn't it? The only player in history to go undefeated in games on the first day. A top cut finish, my 5th one ever? Should I be ashamed because I didn't win? Maybe, but I won't be. I'm going to tell you a truth that I have learned about this game over my 13 years competing. Pokemon, VGC. It's not about dominating tournaments or clever strategies or minor optimizations. It actually isn't even about Pokemon. It's about getting better, learning from your mistakes, and getting up again and again to throw yourself into a storm that is eternally unyielding, no matter how many times it knocks you over. I did not win the World Championships this year, but I did get closer. I'll tell you a secret. The statistically most likely outcome for the rest of my career is that I will never win the World Championships again. But when I look at how things went this year, I can't help but feel a little optimistic. Maybe that makes me a fool, but every year I get better, better and better and better in pursuit of one word: best. My name is WolfeyVGC. This year, I was not the best in the world. Next year, I hope to tell you something different. Oh boy, okay, I gotta tell you, this one was tough. Making a video like this is a gargantuan effort. The amount of times that I was tempted to just give up and never finish it was probably more than you would expect. It is so much work. I mean, we've literally been working on it for months. And this video is only possible because a number of very talented people worked very hard to make it a reality. So I would like to say thank you. First to Wit, who was the main editor of this video, my producer, and my right-hand man. So much of the good work on this channel is thanks to him. He's the unsung hero of this whole WolfeyVGC operation, and there's nobody else that I'd rather have in my corner. Next to Zane, who was my co-writer for the script. I am not the strongest writer, and Zane's unbelievable writing acumen elevated this 30,000 word script far above what it could have reached otherwise. We did basically end up writing the whole thing twice given how much we edited each other, but I think the final product made it worth it. Thank you to Deanna, who helped with editing and created the wonderful illustrations present throughout the video. They add so much personality and life, and the attention to detail never ceases to amaze me. Thank you to Fraser, who composed musical pieces just for this video. It is so special to have something created to perfectly fit the tone we want, and in my eyes, it helped elevate the video to another level beyond. Next to Geo, who helped not only with battle recreations, but also edited part of this video himself. Without him, we would not have hit our deadline. Thank you to the editing team at Iconic for helping to take a part of the Finland section off of our shoulders when we were really stretched thin. Thank you to Scarlet, Yuki, and Dr. Aaron Trailer, who helped editing the script, giving varying perspectives and helping make the video the best it could be. And last, but certainly not least, thank you to you, the viewer. What an honor it is to create a piece of art that means so much to me and to be able to share it with you. I don't take it for granted. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next year.